The big victims of the news who played us all, but turned out to be the real villains. Recently, there was this guy in a town in Ontario who filed charges on his neighbor for spraying him with a water pistol. Her story comes out first to the media, saying how she can't return to work as school support staff until the charges are sorted out, and gives a big sob story about how she was just having a fun water fight with a neighbor and accidentally sprayed this guy while he was mowing his lawn. And weeks later, his story gets published in the paper. He's repeatedly received targeted attacks from this neighbor and others. He says likely because he's the one black guy on the street of a small town, in an interracial marriage, and he releases his security camera footage of him just casually cutting his lawn, with the other neighbor actively telling the kids to bring her water pistol while she's standing behind him, and then spraying him directly with it. And the camera also captures the audio of the aftermath, where some racial slurs are dropped, also a recurring thing. What's also funny is that the neighbor claimed that there was some sort of language barrier misunderstanding between them. The guy is straight up Canadian and speaks clearer than most people. In 1961, Captain Julian Harvey was found drifting at sea in a lifeboat with the lifeless body of one René Duperrault. When he was rescued, he explained that he had been hired by the girl's family to sail them around the Florida Keys for a vacation in a ketch called the Bluebell. He went on to explain that the previous evening, a strong wind had caused the main mast to snap and pierce the hull, causing the ship to sink. Worse still, a fire broke out, separating him from the family and the only other crew member, his own wife. He got into the lifeboat hoping to swing behind and hopefully get through the cabin from behind, but the ship had already sunk rapidly, and the other person he was able to recover was the already dead René. Truly a tragic story. That was until 3.5 days later, Terry Jo Duperrault, the other daughter of the Duperrault family, was found drifting at sea in a small cork dinghy. She was dehydrated, starving, sunburnt like heck, but alive. When she was healthy enough to make a statement, the story she told was very different from Harvey's. She woke up to find her brother and her mother already dead, and when Captain Harvey saw her, he shouted at her to go back to her cabin. She did so, cowering under the covers, and says that Harvey was standing at the door of her cabin. She thinks that maybe he was holding his brother's rifle, but she's not completely sure. He eventually left, and when the water started to fill her room, she went up on deck. Harvey got her to help undo the life raft. However, when the rope slipped through her fingers, he dove into the water after the raft, leaving her on the sinking vessel. She then remembered the cork dinghy and crawled into it. As you can see, her account is very different from Harvey's, and most notably, there was never a fire. Sadly, we'll never likely know the full story, as Harvey would take action to no longer be alive hours after Terry Jo was found. Well, yeah, if that's what he did the moment a potential witness materialized and hadn't even given her statement, that points to one story being more likely than the other, doesn't it? God, horrible. Ian and Angela Diaz. The story appeared on 60 Minutes. In short, Ian, who was a deputy US Marshal, claimed that his ex, Michelle, was posting certain misleading bedroom fantasy adverts on Craigslist in an attempt to get Angela to become a victim of the unspeakable act. Eventually, Michelle ended up arrested and sat in jail for 88 days as police investigated the matter. It was during that investigation that they realized things didn't add up. It was all a ploy to frame Michelle as part of a twisted plot to get her to walk away from a condo she'd purchased with Ian. At first, it was assumed or implied that Angela alone was responsible, and she pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. However, 5 years later, Ian was found guilty for his participation in the plot and sentenced to 10 years in prison himself. This is actually a super sad case because poor Michelle was absolutely tormented in prison. The media coverage of her was horrendous. She couldn't get a job afterwards. Her credit was also ruined. Her parents' business took a dive as well. I know Ian and Angela went to prison, but Michelle's life was seriously ruined, in a way that you can't really make up for, like public perception and stuff. Ugh. Ana Julia Quezada. She was dating a divorced man who had a son. One day, the son goes missing, and the news starts interviewing the parents. She'd always stand next to the dad, crying and begging the kidnapper that, if they're watching, to please give the kid back. I remember this very vividly watching the news. Turns out there was no kidnapping. She got rid of the kid the very first day of his disappearance, and played her part around her boyfriend and the news. People believe she did it out of jealousy and in hopes of convincing her boyfriend to move to her country to get over his kid. Her young daughter also passed away in 1996 in some strange circumstances. In 1864, a train pulled into London carrying a bloodied unconscious man. Police were alerted, and when the man came to, Mueller told them that as they were riding, two men had approached him and tried to rob him. However, Mr. Mueller fought back. He was shot and then left behind as the robbers jumped off the train. What actually happened was Franz Mueller had attacked a Mr. Thomas Briggs, a 69-year-old banker, and robbed him of his gold chain and pocket watch. Later in the day, Mr. Briggs would be found unconscious, lying on the tracks because Mr. Mueller shot him and threw Briggs off the train. Briggs would soon pass away from his injuries. The police were very suspicious, and then a pawnshop owner came forward identifying Mueller as selling him Briggs' gold chain. The London police issued a warrant, however Mueller had already fled the hospital and boarded a sail ship for New York. Scotland Yard inspectors took a steamship to New York, beating Mueller by weeks. They and an entire crowd of people were waiting at the docks when Mueller arrived. And that's the story of the first murder on a train. There's a cool story about it. Mr. Briggs' hat. Corey Harris. He's the guy who went viral earlier this year for showing up at a Zoom court hearing, driving while on a suspended license. He spent 2 days in jail. Then it was reported that Harris should have had his license reinstated 2 years prior. Harris's attorney set up interviews with local TV stations stating his innocence. Good Morning America does a piece on Harris and lectures the viewers to not judge a book by its cover. Harris went back to court. The judge does his homework and discovers Harris has never had a license in Michigan or any other state, yet has been to Secretary of State's office multiple times to renew his ID. The opportunity was there for him to get a license, he just chose not to. He goes viral again, but this time because he lied and embarrassed so many people along the way. Karen Matthews. She faked her daughter's kidnapping not long after Madeleine McCann went missing so that she could get money. She hid her inside a bed at a friend's house and planned to collect the reward money. People actually felt sorry for her, thinking her daughter was missing and that it was a huge police investigation. Ended up in jail for kidnapping, perverting the course of justice, and false imprisonment. Katie Sorensen, the nutjob momfluencer, who claimed a couple was following her through a shopping center, plotting to kidnap her children, supposedly because they were such good-looking kids. Turns out the other couple were just shopping at the same time and did absolutely nothing wrong at all, and that she just wanted the attention and more followers. I just listened to a podcast about a girl, Mackenzie Sharilla. Basically, she, her boyfriend, and another friend were involved in a crash that killed the boyfriend and the friend. She was a driver, and she survived. At first, it seemed like there was some kind of fault in the car, or that she simply lost control of the vehicle, but as the investigation went on, they realized she'd planned the crash and ran into that wall on purpose. It was a crazy listen. Belle Gibson. Claimed she had cancer. Claimed she beat it through her diet. Claimed to donate $1 million to a cancer hospital. Didn't have cancer and didn't donate. She lied about everything. Played the victim too. Who knows how many people died following her advice. The scary part is that if she didn't claim to donate to cancer, nobody would have looked into it and she probably would still be going strong. There were so many frustrated people insisting that her story didn't make sense. For one thing, brain cancer doesn't metastasize. And the other obvious one is that cancer doesn't miraculously go away when you drink freshly squeezed fruit juice. But they couldn't expose her because nobody could prove it when her medical records were private. So due to all the medical privacy laws, the investigators kept hitting dead ends when they tried to expose her health fraud, until somebody gave them the magic advice. If she can lie about this, she can lie about anything. Look for other lies. So they gave up on investigating the medical lies and turned to her financial records, which are much easier to examine. Once they destroyed her credibility regarding the charity, it was easier to break down the cancer lies. Aha! The real-life figure behind the apple cider vinegar series. Spoiler alert, I guess. God, that actress really maxed out on roles that would make people hate her in 2025, between this and Abby in The Last of Us. I used to install security cameras as a side job. I was asked to help out a lady going through a horrible divorce. Her soon-to-be ex-husband was sending her threatening text messages from burner phones. He was coming by at all hours of the night and breaking windows, and a few times he attempted to set their house on fire. A friend of hers reached out to me and explained the situation and asked if I could help her in any way. I purchased cameras and an NVR and went over one night in February and installed the whole system, wires and all. I never felt scared during any of my installations, some of which were in really bad neighborhoods. But for this psycho had me really worried, so I did the job armed. After finishing up, I showed her how the system worked and told her to call me if she ever needed anything else. A couple of weeks later, I get a call from a fire investigator asking me for help in recovering video. He told me that the guy had returned, broke out a first-floor window, and threw in a Molotov cocktail, causing the first floor of the house to be engulfed in flames. The woman and her 2 daughters were trapped upstairs. The police showed before the fire department, and they had to grab an extension ladder from the neighbor's house and rescue the family through a second-floor window. One of the girls was taken to hospital for smoke inhalation. I walked the guy through the process of pulling up the video. Once he got to the right time on the camera facing the bathroom window, he said, the video just goes blank. I told him that I set up the video cameras to be super sensitive to movement, so the only way it can go blank is if the camera is removed or damaged in some way. I directed him to a camera that would cover the area under the camera that goes blank, and he should see somebody mess with it. He tells me that nobody ever approached it. I then informed him that the only way that this scenario is possible is if the guy got into the house and disconnected the feed from the inside. We concluded our conversations since he'd now need to pore through a lot of video in order to find the man going into her house. About a month passes by and I'm driving to work. I hear the woman's name who I'd been helping mentioned on the radio during a news segment. I started paying attention and soon found myself feeling weightless in my chair. It hadn't been her husband at all. She had been the one doing all of these things in order to get her husband arrested and sent to jail. She had burner phones bought to send herself text messages. She had been going out at night and breaking the windows. She had been taking the family out to dinner, excusing herself to go to the restroom, and then driving home to break a window and trying to set the house on fire before returning to the restaurant. She had been the one to disconnect the camera from inside the house the night that she almost killed her whole family in an attempt to frame her husband. I thought I was protecting her from a psycho, but it turns out I was helping the psycho. In short, I thought I was helping a victim by protecting her from her soon-to-be ex-husband, but she was trying to frame him by risking her kids' lives. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Dave Krupa had been casually dating after his 12-year relationship ended and ended up meeting a woman named Carrie Farther. They hit it off instantly and spent a lot of time together over the next few weeks. This was until Carrie texted Dave at work and asked if they could move in together. This was a shock to Dave and he said no. Carrie then sent a super nasty response and basically told him to F off. Dave then started getting bombarded with texts and emails from Carrie. The barrage of messages, already relentless and almost daily, started to expand to include other people in Dave's life, like his recent sort of ex-girlfriend Liz Golyar. Liz became a constant target of Carrie's stalking. Things escalated. At one point, Liz's house burned down. I suggest looking up this case for the full details because there's just so much going on in this story. As it turns out, Liz had killed Carrie, ostensibly out of jealousy of Carrie's quickly growing relationship with Dave. Liz then began impersonating Carrie and sending messages pretending to be her. That's right, Liz was the one behind all of those messages. The whole story is absolutely wild. I suggest checking out the book A Tangled Web by Leslie Rule for the full story. It's absolutely nuts. Mike Philpott. He wanted to show that his ex was violent and dangerous to their children, and he wanted to play the hero. He devised a plan to set alight his family home, and he'd rescue the family. Unfortunately, the fire took hold faster than he anticipated, and the rest of his family perished in the fire. He then played the victim on TV shows and news until they discovered that he in fact set the fire. Brittany Norwood. A former soccer star that worked at the Lululemon athletic clothing store in an upscale, wealthy neighborhood. She had worked the night shift with her manager and both with the victim of a brutal robbery and murder. A co-worker arrived at the Lululemon store the next morning, discovered the scene and contacted the police. The manager, Jana Murray, was brutally murdered and knifed over 60 times. Norwood suffered minimal injuries. Her pants ripped and she was tied up. Norwood claimed an African-American man first killed Murray, then approached Norwood, ripped her pants apart and committed the unspeakable act. The police initially believed her story and sent her home. During the investigation, the police came across text messages of the manager, Jana Murray, discovering Norwood had been stealing merchandise and said she was going to confront her about the theft and then fire her. The police soon made Norwood a suspect, especially after discovering Murray's car, with Norwood's blood inside, parked 3 blocks away from the store. Norwood claimed that the robber had told her to move the car, then walk back to the store or that they'd kill her. The police believed that this was absurd that she'd be allowed to leave and then return after being allowed to leave. She was arrested, charged with murder, convicted, and sentenced to life without parole. It was later revealed at her trial the entire murder was overheard by several people who didn't intervene. An Apple Store employee overheard women fighting and assumed it was just drama. Oh boy, How jaded would you have to be to mistake the sounds of a presumably traumatic murder for a tiff between co-workers? Sounds more like people were being cowardly to me. Tracy Andrews immediately comes to mind. She swore up and down her boyfriend was killed in a road rage incident. This was the 90s in the UK. The police put together a press conference to appeal for information, but it was designed to catch Tracy out. She told the story wrong because she couldn't remember her lies. Tracy had stabbed him 42 times. Joe Glinovics, the Illinois cop that staged his self-deletion to look like he was murdered by assailants. Police and community rallied behind his widow for weeks, searched for the assailants, funds were collected and donated, and tributes were made. Turns out he did actually finally off himself because he'd been embezzling money from a police program and he was about to be found out. Years ago, there was a local news story about a woman who was caught shoplifting baby supplies and formula. The cop that responded took pity on her because she had a young kid and no money. So instead of arresting her, he bought the stuff for her. A local business even went as far as to offer her a job, and I happened to know the owner. A few days after the story, I asked him if she got the job, and he said no, because every single one of her references said she was a massive kleptomaniac. Alright, it's small potatoes compared to some of these, but our city recently held its annual marathon. One man posted on the city subreddit that at one of the water stations his water had been spiked, and he asked for advice with the next steps. Of course, the next day the news story comes out. A man running in the marathon had acted erratically and attacked people, and claims he was under the influence of something put in his water. Maybe a month later, we sort of eventually find out the guy had a casual crystal habit and figured it would help him run faster. He took too much, had a violent paranoid episode, and attacked random people. I don't remember her name, I think it was Sherry Papini, but there was a YouTube video I watched of a girl who faked her own kidnapping and was trying to play the victim. While all of the resources were going to finding Sherry, there was a woman who was actually kidnapped. Sherry ended up serving jail time. Alicia Steve Head is a Spanish businesswoman who claimed to be a survivor of the attacks on the World Trade Center on September 11, 2001, under the name Tania Head. She joined the World Trade Center Survivors Network support group, later becoming its president. Her name was regularly mentioned in media reports of the attacks. In 2007, it was revealed Head's story was a hoax. She wasn't in New York City on September 11, 2001, but in reality was attending classes in her native city of Barcelona. Stephen Grant. He was my neighbor. His wife disappeared, and he was all over the news asking to help her and fake crying as much as possible. Turns out he had her torso in his garage, and the rest of her body parts were scattered in the metro park behind our neighborhood, including her head. Anna Ayala. She claimed she found a fingertip in a bowl of Wendy's chili. The press coverage cost the company over $20 million in losses. Turns out the finger came from a co-worker of her husband who had lost it in a work accident, and she intentionally planted it. 9 years in state prison. Natalia Grace's adoptive parents, who claimed that she was an adult when they adopted her. She was actually a child, not the diabolical mastermind akin to the movie Orphan. Bethany Storrow was the victim of an acid attack that was racially motivated in Vancouver, Washington. Turns out she maimed herself trying to self-delete with acid. She chickened out of drinking it after pouring it on her face. I remember watching an unhinged interview after she was found out. Her reasoning was that all of the attention would allow her to tell people about Jesus. LaDonna Humphrey, a true crime podcaster, foster mother of 5, multiple charities in her name, with a focus on cold cases where only the victim's body was found, and a director of a sober living facility. I highly recommend Who's Afraid of LaDonna Humphrey, as this is the tip of the iceberg. It turns out she was hounding her co-hosts on a podcast through catfish accounts for content. It was only when she took a screenshot and she was still logged in as one of these accounts, sending it to her co-hosts, that things started to unravel. She somehow gained police access to case files of Melissa Witt, masquerading as a PI, and uploaded her body being found to YouTube. She accused a completely innocent bystander of her murder on her podcast. The charities? Yeah, she was using them as her personal piggy bank. Her sober living facility was run as a cult with blatant financial fraud, overcrowding, slave labor, stealing funds meant for the business. Oh, and those fosters? One's a convicted unspeakable act offender who's also the handyman for the woman's sober living facility. Ugh. My God. Well, she seems to have taken the wrong lessons from her true crime podcaster lifestyle. Namely, the only thing that she tried to apply to her life was how to get away with murder. Luckily, not the literal kind. What a monster. Loschgate. Ryan Loscht and 3 other Olympic athletes lied about being robbed while at weapon point while out in Rio. Turns out they were drunk, went to a gas station, and Ryan vandalized part of it after peeing in public. The idiot got suspended, and he lost 4 sponsorships among other things when the lie was uncovered. Helena Taylor when she was replaced on Bayonetta 3. She was the original voice actress for Bayonetta in the first 2 games. About 2 years ago, she came out with an angry statement that she had been offered what sounded like a rather low amount of money for the 3rd game, and then replaced by Jennifer Hale. The entire vibe was that it was an intentional lowball to get rid of her. She insisted that fans should boycott the game. And you saw the response immediately on Reddit. People wanted to jump to her defense and criticized Platinum Games. Slowly, the rest of the story began to come out. She apparently demanded a ridiculous fee plus royalties. She'd lied or at the very least deliberately misrepresented the deal previously. She increasingly came off as a little unhinged and vindictive, with an inflated sense that she was responsible for the success of the games and irreplaceable. For several days, it seemed like a new detail was coming out every day that kept making her look worse and worse. It was particularly interesting to see this happen in such a short period of time, to watch the public opinion shift as more information was revealed with each subsequent day. It really showed the importance of getting all of the facts, hearing from multiple sides, and not immediately falling for rage bait internet drama in fan culture. What red flags about a company have you encountered while interviewing for a job? Number of contractors to employees ratio. Also specific keywords such as unlimited potential income or this is not a scam. Unlimited potential income, this, especially when it comes with the really only limiting factor in how you earn is you. Cue cheesy crap-eating grin. I recently had to work on some scripts involving recruitment techniques for life insurance agency development heads. And after processing all of it and learning some of the crap they use to try and cajole you into buying insurance or recruit you, I've concluded that they're terrible. Primerica by chance? They dealt with life insurance and tried to recruit me by paying $500 to take a class and get my license. I could make $10,000 a month. No. Also World Financial. I've been dropping friends like flies thanks to those D-bags who trapped them. Any place that requires you to pay for something to come to work for them is a red flag. Extremely high turnover, or you're being interviewed by people who have worked in their department for less than 1 year. This. But the thing is, those places will hire anyone, and that's the upshot. You just have to tough it out for a year so you can get that oh-so-necessary criteria of minimum 1 year's experience that every other freaking employer wants for their entry-level positions. Yeah, related, I quit a very good job after 5 years because they brought in a new manager who was intolerable. My replacement lasted 3 days before quitting. Over the next year, that position turned over 4 more times, all because no one could stand this manager. Some of the new employees quit after a week or 2. The company finally wised up and realized that the manager was the problem. These are all pretty good red flags so far, but I'll add a few I've encountered. It took me a long time into my career to trust my instincts on these red flags. 1. When you're going to be reporting to more than one person or department. 2. Super condescending attitudes on behalf of the interviewer. 3. I work in IT, and I had a manager ask me once what I would do if I knew that restarting the system was not going to fix the problem and might make it worse. But he would tell me to restart it anyway or find a new job. I told him, if it's going to make things worse, I'm not going to restart the system regardless of what you tell me to do. I ended up getting the job, but that question actually turned out to be a huge red flag. He tried to pull crap like that all the time. 4. If I can't stand someone's personality in a short interview, I'm not going to be able to stand working for them. Awesome list. I recently experienced number 2 where the interviewer was telling me how budgets work at my current position at a place she only knows in passing. Not only was she very wrong, but I'm the budget person in my department, so I know exactly how wrong she is. This came up when she was annoyed that I didn't fill out my salary requirements on the job app for a position with 0 salary information posted. She said they needed that information from me because they have a limited budget, unlike where I currently work. Spoiler alert, my department's broke and my salary's paid on soft money. We're the exact opposite of rolling in the dough. She followed this up with, and we don't want to break any hearts, which was almost about as obnoxious as refusing to give me any kind of hint about their budgeted range for the position. So it was all about me trying to be psychic and guess a number that she felt was appropriate, while also being a number that I felt was appropriate. In the end, they didn't offer me the job, and I'm glad, since the interviews, too, both 15 minutes or more late on their end, I've heard that woman's name come up from someone who currently works at that place. Surprise, surprise, no one has anything good to say about her. Bullet dodged. Interviewer: how well do you handle conflict, such as if you work with someone who might yell a lot? Me: well, I don't think anyone should yell at someone while working. Interviewer: your direct report has a history of being passionate about his work. Oftentimes he raises his voice and it might make people uncomfortable. Red flag, run! My last boss specifically ended the interview, which he did himself, by saying that he was a gigantic butthole and that people hate to work for him, and would I be able to work under a boss like him? I eagerly agreed in a way that still sickens me to this day. And I paid for it because he was a man of his word. In fact, if anything, he was subtle and subdued in that interview. He was downplaying what a massive C-word he was. Frick you, Gene. Okay, I've had some unpleasant bosses in my past. Maybe I would have saved a lot of time if some of them had told me up front that they were just absolute buttholes. Last interview I went to, they told me they were going to be bigger than Facebook. The company had 6 Facebook likes and a web page smothered with errors, and got angry at me when I suggested some easy 1-minute steps to fix them. It was for a tech company. You could have just finished with, "We're going to be bigger than Facebook." Did they tell you that they couldn't meet your salary requirements, but would make up for it with stock options? They always seem to have a terrible vesting schedule as well, to the point that you know the company won't be in business long enough to actually vest your options, which I'm sure is not an accident. So, how's the work-life balance here? Followed by laughter from them. This question triggered a big green flag from my current employer. They said that they were really flexible with scheduling, and I could make my own hours as long as they occurred between 5 a.m. and 7 p.m., and that I would receive a few weeks' notice if my hours were going to ramp up for any reason. Really one of the biggest reasons I'm still here. My current job is like that. I asked about the start time and they were like, most people start at 9 a.m., but as long as you get your time in, we don't really care when you're here. The vacation policy for salaried employees is something like, write the days that you'll be gone on a big calendar so we know when not to bug you. Granted, they expect about 55 hours a week, but coming from a job where I was written up for coming in 30 minutes early so I could leave 30 minutes early, never mind being on call 24/7, it's very much a perk. The biggest danger, screaming red warning flag was when I asked about work-life balance and specifically, what's the day-to-day look like? Apparently all the devs started at 11 or 12 and they were there until 8 to 9, indicating 0 families, home lives, girlfriends, or anything else important in their lives that isn't working that kind of schedule. I ended the interview as quick as I could after that. Sure beats 7 to 9. The guys interviewing me took me out to dinner, then went back to the office for a few more hours. One of them had a newborn at home. Right after I graduated, I interviewed for an entry-level data entry or admin position. They offered to hire me if I paid them $750 to complete their training course. Ugh. Oh boy, I've got a list. The interviewer had me stand against the wall while he rated me on my wardrobe. Father-son operation. The two interviewed me, argued a bit over stuff in front of me. Employee manual of one company, I don't know why they gave it to me at the interview, but they did. When the employee is no longer useful to the employee and company must part ways. Italian firm getting started in the US, the interviewer actually excused himself to go fondle the secretary. Googling the firm netted a few links to OSHA violations and deaths. Facebook page of one employee talking about his life on an oil derrick in the Gulf of Mexico. Travel percentage kept changing wildly in the interview. Panel interview, a few folks got up halfway through. Very vague questions about qualifications, mostly about me. Generic skills test and then a DISC assessment. This is a 110% job. You'll also be expected to work at least 2 weekends a month. I'm encountering a series of red flags right now. So far I've had 5 rounds, yes, 5, of interviews for a mid-level managerial job. All but one of which were rescheduled by the company at the last minute due to conflicts with the various interviewers. I finally reached the final round with a senior executive a couple of days ago, only to have that person show up in an annoyed huff and announce that they had only just now received my resume. They then went on to say, and I quote, "I don't even know why they're considering you for this role." They then followed up with this gem, "Which of our offices is this for again?" Needless to say, after all that rigmarole, I plan on turning down the offer if they send one. We work hard and play hard. Bullcrap. You just work hard and have awkward social get-togethers at most once a month. This isn't Wall Street. All that's going to happen is that you're going to make me work 60 hours a week because of this mentality. I work at a supermarket where we work long shifts, and then once a year we have a Christmas do so loud and out of hand that we've been banned from several pubs and clubs. Actually telling me about any obligatory playing corporate activities. Guys, I came here to work. I already have a family to spend my life with. I'm not going to substitute my life for you. You may be a part of my life, don't try to grab the whole life. I work for the Air Force. They love to have mandatory fun times. Everyone hates it. Want us to have fun? Give us the afternoon to spend with our families. I already spend more time with my coworkers than the people I love. Interview at a landscaping company. I commented on how nice all the plants were and what a relaxing environment the office must be. The interviewer laughed nervously and said, "It's not really." Then I met the boss and was talking about how I work well with my past managers, and he said, "And what if your manager is a difficult person who yells a lot?" He was referring to himself, and I knew it, but I was desperate and needed the job. Luckily, I left after 3 months. I had a boss describe himself as sometimes acting a little bipolar. Not to mention his wife worked for him, so they would have screaming matches from their offices and be really passive-aggressive. So glad not to be there anymore. Anyone who asks you how you handle someone who's bipolar or yell a lot is a huge freaking red flag. Oh god, is there really any worse combination than being trapped in a toxic workplace and in the middle of a toxic relationship? Glad you got out of that place. During an interview, my future boss mentioned that my predecessors flaked out after a day and 2 weeks, respectively. Turns out they didn't flake, he's just a massive butthole. I lasted 5 months. Went for a marketing executive role, turned up to the office, and it was almost totally bare except for 8 or 9 mismatched chairs. We were called into a side office for an interview. The central heating wasn't working, so the interviewer was wearing gloves and a winter jacket. When he mentioned it was commission-only pay, I walked straight out. Beware the Cobra Group. They are mainly just charity fundraisers who give their jobs outrageously misleading titles, like marketing executive. Also applicable if you live in Scotland is a group called Meraki Rose. Noticed a few of their adverts for similarly titled jobs in marketing and sales, saying you don't need experience or even a degree in a related field. They're basically telling you to do one of those jobs where you stand in the high street and try to sell insurance to passers-by. Again, commission only, and they make you do unpaid work at the start as training. Plus, specific info on them and in the job adverts is very hard to come by, and everything is vague, which is also a big red flag as far as I'm concerned. Being left waiting for half an hour for the interviewer, I picked up my bag and walked out. I once was left for 45 minutes with the receptionist, whom I talked to a bit, and this was in undergrad, and I'd never had a job before, so I was desperate. The interviewer, when I walked out, grabbed my resume from the receptionist, looked at it, and then said, "Okay, we'll call you if you get it." I didn't get it. I originally wondered if this was some kind of weird twist interview where they were just trying to assess how I would interact with the receptionist, but I honestly don't think they're that smart. So then, why the heck call me in for an interview if you've gathered from my resume that you don't want me? I just don't get it. You never know what kind of things companies will do as part of their interview process. It isn't uncommon for interviewers to talk to the receptionist to see how you've behaved. Be nice to the receptionist. If the receptionist says you acted like a prick, you'll almost never get hired. I can't remember who it was, perhaps Henry Ford or George Westinghouse, but I recall reading about how this famous business leader used to interview potential executives. As part of the interview, they'd go to lunch. If the candidate salted his food without tasting it first, he wouldn't be hired. The reasoning is that since he didn't taste the food first, he didn't know if it needed extra salt. He was dismissed as unthinking. The moral of the story is, once again, that some employers use unusual tests on job applicants. Be on your best behavior. I once caused a red flag for a person being interviewed. I worked at an IT help desk for a retail chain, and the people who called in could get pretty abusive on the phone. A new guy was being interviewed for the help desk team in a cubicle next to me, and I was on with a particularly nasty caller. So I turned up the volume loud enough so he could hear her cussing me out the whole time. I didn't overhear the whole interview, but I knew he declined their offer. Of course, from his end, this was a huge red flag. He's watching me do the job he'll soon be doing and getting cussed and treated horribly the whole time. It was my way of saying, get out while you can. I saw one of those ads that said work for students, $15 an hour or something. I called the number and set up an interview. Should have known not to interview for a job you don't have to apply for. I got there and it was this crappy building downtown with flickering fluorescent lights. They brought me to a room not unlike a doctor's waiting room where several other people sat filling out papers. I was skeptical but needed a job, so I started filling out my paperwork. When I flipped the page over, I finally saw the name of the company I was applying to, Vector Marketing. I only knew about them because a friend of mine sold Cutco knives for a while. I crumpled up the paper and left without a word. I went in for an interview with Vector once and it was absolutely hilarious. First off, the bullcrap started before I even walked in the door. I told them on the phone that I wasn't interested in a sales position, but would be down to interview for an office job. When I got there, they said that there weren't any office jobs, but I could interview for sales. They just lied to get me in the door. At this point, I wasn't going to take a job even if I got it. I just wanted to stay and watch the crap show. Now, as I walk in, and even more so as I went through the process, I realize exactly what kind of company this place is. As you walk in the door, you see a very nice reception area, and then look behind it and it's this big bare room with a bunch of chairs and a projector screen. As they sign me in and everything, I realize why this place looks only half built. They only built or decorated exactly as much as they needed. See, the entire building is designed with the flow of their con in mind. You walk in and are stopped at reception, which looks nice and legit. An attractive girl hands you an application and directs you down the hall to the waiting area. Once your turn comes, you're led into the interview office, which had part or all of one wall missing, not gone, just never built. After the interview, if you chose to continue and they chose to let you, you're escorted to what I only assume was the indoctrination zone. I left after the interview, so I don't know exactly. This was a large, entirely unfinished portion of the building. No decorations or anything, just a projector and chairs. This was the most insulting part, as it made it clear that their intentions were for everything to seem professional and on the up and up until we accepted a position, at which point they no longer cared about our opinion of their facilities. But yeah, they literally just built just enough walls to facilitate their scheme, no more, no less. They literally don't even bother trying to hide how little effort they put into it. You can even see that final warehousey room from the reception area, as they couldn't even put up enough walls to hide it. Another amusing thing was the interview. They were clearly using psychological tactics to bully kids into agreeing to work for them. For instance, the interviewer was extremely tall, and the desk and chair were huge, while the chair they gave me was short and uncomfortable. If I'd been the same height as the interviewer, I would still have been at least a foot below him sitting like that. In my memory, it's almost like King Yemma's desk from Dragon Ball Z. It was clear that they set it up so that the interviewer would be extremely imposing, and became even more clear when I started asking questions and the interviewer was originally very annoyed and pushy. They definitely set it up so that the interviewer could bully poor kids into joining, as that was definitely what they were trying with me. Not surprisingly, the interviewer became a nervous wreck once he realized I wasn't going to fold anytime soon. Well, initially you'll be a contractor, but there's opportunities for full-time employment in the future. My job involves managing an unemployment database. The amount this happens, especially for students, is astounding. Unpaid internship, 25 hours a week on a 6-month contract. Possibility of employment in the future. It's utterly disgusting how companies attempt to, and do, get away with working students the equivalent of a part-time job or more for free, and lie to them that they might actually hire them in the future. Students need to stand up against unpaid internships and refuse to take them, nationwide. Yep, I'm sad to say that I've fallen for a few of those ads and applied for a few of those kinds of jobs when I was a student. Oh well, you live and learn. Question: what kind of workload can I expect on the average week? I've heard horror stories of 80-hour weeks at big companies. Answer: let's not beat around the bush. All companies expect a 50 to 60-hour week. They don't say they do, but they do. Get right out of there. I'm very happy at my current job that doesn't even require me to answer emails outside of the 40 hours I work. I would gladly work 50 hours a week as long as I was A, paid time and a half for it, and B, given a schedule that actually gets followed. I think in any interview you want to ask questions about the company when it comes time for you to ask questions. 1. You want to specifically ask about the culture. Maybe ask the interviewer what they think about the culture. 2. Ask what kind of turnaround the company has. Low turnover probably means a good environment. 3. Ask the interviewer what they like most about working at the company. Pay attention to their body language and their answer. They're probably not going to be honest if they hate it, but you might be able to tell. If they tell you that they don't like it, that's a huge red flag. When I was first looking into an office IT position, I was in an interview when someone knocked on the office door, asked a question and left. After he left, the interviewer told me, "That's the person we're going to fire when you get this job." Gave me a bad vibe, so I turned down the offer when I got it. Joke of an offer too, $21K a year. I was making $40K a year working in retail. Things I've encountered. Bad-mouthing other applicants. Not by name, but still not cool. Didn't even look at your resume before they offered you an interview. Then mentioning they didn't even look at your resume before offering you an interview. Offered you an interview, again, before they even looked at your resume for a position you don't have experience or skills in. The good old gem, the pay sucks and the hours are long, but the work is great. Bad-mouthing other facilities or businesses in the same field. Group interviews where you're expected to give your answer in front of 8 or 9 other candidates. I've probably encountered other red flags, but these were the ones which stuck out the most for me. A thing called knowledge fishing. I interviewed for a building company in the UK for a marketing executive. They wanted to branch into residential builds from a large commercial network, but the marketing manager said they had no idea how to go about it at that stage. Well, I went through the interview process and did my best, then I got a message from them about a week later that I was through to the next stage. However, they wanted me to give them a full presentation of what I think their whole marketing strategy should be for every area, including social media and online marketing, and they wanted a full hour on each part. They ended the letter by saying, "Don't worry, we have a marketing plan, we just want to see if your thoughts are similar to ours." Ding ding ding, bigger red flag than at the end of the first act of Les Miserables. It's worth reiterating that this was a marketing executive, not a marketing director or anything huge like that. I told them I wasn't interested and left it at that. It was pretty obvious they wanted my input to make their marketing proposal, rather than to offer an actual job, especially as their letter stated something completely different to what the manager had told me. I know that this was a knowledge fishing job too, as I was talking to another agency about this and they told me that they've barred this company from working with them for doing exactly this before. In conclusion, company wanted me to do a huge presentation to them. Turned out they were fishing for ideas to implement without having an actual job to offer. Pre-interview, but if a company's website is tailored towards recruiting new employees way more than it is towards clients, it's a bad sign. A real reputable company that is making money wants their website to be client-facing first, and have a tab or link somewhere for careers for those who are interested. If 50% or more of the main landing page is catered towards selling you on why they're such a good career choice, it's either A, a scam, or B, a meat grinder business where the turnover is extremely high, or C, a company that has no idea what it's doing. What's your in-laws from hell story? Husband took his own life. In-laws took me to court over insurance money. Most insurance policies don't pay out in the event of someone taking their own life. However, SGLI through the military will pay out in almost all circumstances. I'm doing well these days and I haven't heard from them in a few years. There was a lot of harassment before it actually made it in front of a judge. Forged signatures on beneficiary update forms that were magically found after his death and hadn't ever been filed. It was thrown out pretty quickly, but not before lots of headaches and money down the drain to a thankfully great attorney. Obviously, they were crazy before this, but it really was the cherry on top. His dad was obsessed with trying to catch us doing the deed, going so far as having his own key cut for our house. He had our keys one day when he was waiting in for a workman for us. He would just barge in at any time, never knocked on doors, tried to often barge into the bathroom when it was being used, also liked me to catch him pleasuring himself, would wait until he knew we were a few minutes away. We often called them to let them know we were nearly there, and then he'd whip it out and go to town and looked me dead in the eye when I caught him. Creepiest man alive. We changed to the locks and reduced contacts. When partner and I split, he called me several times to offer a shoulder to cry on. No, thank you. The in-laws have been going through a rough time financially for a while, and my wife and I have been paying their credit card and parent loan for a couple of years. Father-in-law's parents passed this year, and he gets a large but not massive inheritance, around $75K. We keep paying the bills because father-in-law is still not working full-time and he puts the inheritance away, so mother-in-law, who is horribly irresponsible with the money, can't access it. We just arrived on Christmas Eve and there's a Lexus sitting in the garage, paid for in cash, and now father-in-law is talking about how he wants a Cadillac. I'm so teed off that I haven't been able to sleep, and I don't want to frick up the holidays, so I'm biting my tongue until we leave, but there is no way we're paying the bills anymore. $5 says they'll react with, "But we need it! How can you be so selfish?" Don't cave. Remember how much that car cost. Remember they were saying in front of you, payer of their fricking bills, that they want a Cadillac. There's an important saying that one should never ascribe to malice what can be explained by stupidity, and I think that probably applies here. Hopefully they saw reason and accepted the solution with grace. My mother wore all black to our wedding, complete with a black hat with a hanging black mesh to cover her face like she was in mourning. This made me laugh. So melodramatic. Does she always act like this? I'm low-key in love with passive-aggressive antics from family. My entire extended family is so melodramatic, I'm running out of popcorn. After driving almost 11 hours with husband to see in-laws, mother-in-law accused me of keeping her son away from her, and how I'm not ever gonna let her see her son again, to my face, and started crying in front of multiple adults and children. The next day, when I asked to speak with her to let her know that what she did was a little unreasonable and very hurtful to me, she showed her true colors and went from crying victim to screaming viciously at me and trying to hit me. She screamed me and husband, her son, out of the house and threw the gifts we had bought her out of the door like pieces of trash. I cannot believe this is the woman who gave birth to my husband. She's like she's from another species. She sounds slightly mentally unstable. Oh, she just sounds very manipulative, playing the victim for the audience and getting mad when she realizes she's not getting what she wants. My mother-in-law said we could have the wedding at the place she works, for free, otherwise the venue would cost upwards of $7,000 just to rent out. She decided that gave her free license to plan everything to her specifications, including the date, what we would eat, the flowers, what we would drink, and even what music I'd have at my wedding. She invited more people to the wedding than me and my husband combined. To top it off, she refused to watch my husband's son on our wedding night, saying that he would feel rejected if he wasn't allowed to stay with us. Each thing happened by itself, and it wasn't until they all added up that I realized my wedding had been hijacked, under the guise of, "That's how it needs to be if you're going to have it at my place of work," which was bullcrap. She just wanted to control everything. My husband called her out on it later, and she's reduced her meddling to almost zero now. Thank goodness. This happened to me exactly. She always used to ask, I'm divorced now, why we didn't have wedding photos displayed. Because I hated being reminded of that day never seemed like a very nice response. My soon-to-be mother-in-law devoted an inordinate amount of time petitioning the state to allow her son to be remanded into her custody for a day to attend my wedding. He was in jail awaiting trial for fighting a cop and nurse after getting picked up for drunk and disorderly. He was denied bail because he was currently on probation from previous alcohol-fueled shenanigans, theft and assault, and was looking at a nickel once he finally got a court date. She wouldn't listen to my wife and I when we asked her to stop, so we had to write our own letter to the Department of Corrections letting them know we would have an open bar at the reception and it would be a really bad idea if my brother-in-law was in attendance. We showed him pictures and videos 4 years later when he got out, the first time. Fun fact, my brother-in-law is the reason I'm on first-name basis with the local sheriffs in his hometown, as for the first 3 years I dated his sister, there wasn't a family function that he, the brother-in-law, attended where they didn't get called out. Out of curiosity, how's the brother-in-law doing now? Today he's walking around on parole as a convicted felon, carrying the balance of a 20-year sentence over his head, and someone is waiting for him to break parole. The problem is that he's definitely got a Jekyll and Hyde thing going on. When he's sober, he's one of the kindest, most generous, and most noble human beings you'll ever meet. But as soon as he starts drinking, it's all downhill from there. One of the first times I ever met him, he literally, as in took it off and handed it to me, gave me the shirt off his back so that I could make a good impression on their grandparents. He then proceeded to get so drunk that emergency services had to be called, which set the tone for the next 15 years of our brother's by-marriage relationship. I care deeply for the guy and do what I can to help him and his kids, but he doesn't have my home address for a reason. To answer the original question, he's getting his next 30-day chip next week, and we're all really proud of him. Again, I personally am hoping he sticks with it this time. This isn't as out there as some of the overtly rude in-laws, but mine were so utterly self-absorbed, insular, and lacking in social skills that I was literally ignored throughout most of my early encounters with them. They had a family culture which they all buy into, in which my father-in-law is the center of everything. The only family pictures in the house were of him, none of the 3 kids, all food was prepared to his tastes, and he had no concept of other people's needs or feelings. Initially, I felt utterly rejected and disapproved of, because who goes to dinner again and again with people and is never asked one question, not even, "How are you?" It took me a long time to realize that they just had no idea how to interact with other people because they lived in this complete bubble. To this day, my father-in-law treats every conversation as an opportunity to change the topic to himself, no matter how outside of his experience it is. But I realize that they never cared enough about me to bother to disapprove of me. That being said, my father-in-law's levels of narcissism are so great that he sees slights and digs at him in a lot of my Facebook posts and unfriends me because he couldn't bear the idea that I wasn't considering his feelings with every thought I shared. As he's so accustomed to everyone catering to his needs all the time. I'm sure I was supposed to be wounded to have no longer been in his good graces, but I just laughed. I think he is genuinely and cluelessly taken aback when he's not considered the most important and greatest person in the room. My mother-in-law refers to all of her daughters-in-law as son's first wife. She gave me used stationery for Christmas. Want more? She wore a white dress to my brother-in-law's wedding rehearsal dinner and interrupted, then stopped the best man's toast so that the soup wouldn't get cold. She told me that I'm a horrible mother for not sending my kids outside to play unsupervised all summer, like she did in the 70s where mums would kick the kids out, lock the doors, and tell kids not to come home until dinner. I nearly died after having my first child, and she told me that God was telling me I'm not fit to be a mum of more kids. After we had our second, she told me that I had my hands full and had no business having a third. After my third child, she told me I had too many children for anyone to ever want to babysit. By the way, she has 3 kids. I keep a very clean house, but I have 3 young boys. They're messy. Before brother-in-law and sister-in-law came to visit one time, she sent a cleaning crew ahead to clean my house so that it would be up to their standards. He's the golden child. Father-in-law lives with us 6 months a year while he collects butterflies for his book. He pays no rent and runs up our utility bills with no thought about it. When we ask him to clean up after himself, he says he didn't realize he'd made such a mess, but thought it was my job as an at-home mum to clean up after the men. He's not invited back for 2016. When she comes to our house to see the kids, I regularly tell her not to get involved in our laundry. She always ignores me, goes through our closets, rifles through our stuff, and then makes comments about what she finds. To be clear, my husband always stands up to her. I was the one who constantly tried to repair their relationship. I finally gave that up last year. We're now essentially no contact with them, and they are not allowed in our house. To talk to the kids on the phone without us supervising, and phone calls are only on holidays. And now, after reading this, the narrator has decided to thoroughly stalk and vet individuals before any deepening of relationship going forward. Who would want a monster like this in their life? Where do I start? My mother-in-law and my grandmother-in-law are both weird about food. A few years ago, Grandma left a turkey to defrost on the counter for 4 days. My sister-in-law came over, almost fell down due to the smell. Grandma said the turkey needed to be at room temperature for the enzymes to develop. My sister-in-law had to bag it, toss it, and scrub down the kitchen to make it fit for humans again. My mother-in-law had a big dinner one year. Rather than use paper plates, she used real ones. She had about 50 people or so. We didn't go, but about a week later or so, we were over. There was lots of snow on the ground, and my dogs were out in the yard. One of them kept going over to a snowdrift and digging and digging. We went to see what was up. The plates were all buried in the snow. Rather than run them a bunch at a time through the dishwasher, she left them outside and they were covered by snow. So, service for 50 people, filthy, left outside for a week. No wonder my dog wouldn't leave that snowdrift alone. Nothing says loving like week-old roast beef stuck to a plate in the snowdrift. Last one for now, Grandma was supposed to get a bottle of pickled peppers yesterday, as part of her Christmas gift. In the general chaos of kids and everything, the bottle, still wrapped, broke. It was all mopped up and tossed. We told her, sorry, we'll get you another one. Her response, why did you throw it away? We told her it was broken and the glass was all over the food. She told us we could have washed off the peppers and still eaten them. We told her, no, you'd die, and she refused to believe that. And this is why I never, ever, ever, ever eat anything these people cook. Not ever, not at all. So much to tell, but I'll just say that every once in a while, me and my wife have had to deal with a wellness check from the police because her parents call and tell the police they haven't heard from their daughter in weeks, even though they talked to her the other day. And they also say I'm one of those people who would chop my wife into pieces. Luckily, my step-uncle is a lieutenant in the sheriff's office, and the last time they got a call from the chief telling them to stop. I state I wanted to host Thanksgiving and invite all the family. Mother-in-law then invites everyone to her house and not us. Found out when I started calling sisters to firm up plans the week before. Also, the only family member not invited to a niece's baby shower. So done caring after 36 years of being the last invited or not being invited at all. Of course, we always get invited to the work parties. Okay, so my mother-in-law at the time of the story was about 350 pounds. She chain-smoked these terrible all-black cigarettes that were longer and thinner than normal cigarettes, and smelled like death, and she would only wear polyester muumuus that she bought in the 70s. Her voice sounded exactly like Roz from Monsters, Inc., and the only things she would talk about were how hard it was to find a new muumuu, or how her channeling was going, and what the various spirits had to say. The first time I met my mother-in-law, she sat me down and started talking to me about the energies that spoke to her from the Pleiades. As she was telling me about how they were going to fix the world, I realized that to her the Pleiades was one place, a bunch of space lights that were all very close to each other because they're close together from our point of view. When I, in my naivete, tried to explain to her that the stars that make up the constellation are in fact an enormous distance apart, and some of them don't exist anymore, she just scowled at me, shook her head and said, "No," and kept talking. Later that night, my wife and I were awoken by a huge commotion and we found her drunkenly destroying the kitchen. When we asked her what she was doing, she said, "The energies need a burrito." So we made her a burrito and sent her to bed. In conclusion, my mother-in-law is an insane, drunken chain smoker who only wears polyester muumuus and channels the spirits of the aliens who live in the Pleiades, who want a burrito. At my wedding, after the ceremony, our new mother-in-law started yelling at my husband because he made a joke to his father. She then proceeded to storm off, dragging his sisters with her. After about 5 minutes, her F-buddy of the week stomped over and just started going off on my husband for being disrespectful. I was almost certain my reception was going to turn into a brawl. 3 years later, she still hasn't apologized. Oh, where can I start? Gave my 7-month-year-old a scale for her first Christmas so she wouldn't get fat like me. Told my husband that he wasn't allowed to get a vasectomy because he might want kids with his next wife. Told me I was gross and that she didn't know why her son would want to come home to me. The night our daughter was born, she berated my husband for giving our daughter the ugliest name she had ever heard, my grandmother's name and his grandmother's name. Told my mother my name was ridiculous and ugly. This year she cancelled Thanksgiving and Christmas to try and teach us some weird lesson. It was fabulous. I could honestly go on, but she is just a bitter old lady. Called me by the ex-wife's name for a couple of years, and it wasn't as if hubby's first marriage even lasted a year. During visits, if I admired anything in her home, I was told, "You can't have it." I wasn't allowed to do chores to help out. She even took my husband's pants out of my hands when I was doing laundry and pre-treated them with Tilex. Ruined them, but I was to blame for rushing her. If I brought presents for her, I was extravagant. If I did not, I was cheap. If I asked about the family, I was a busybody. If I didn't know the details, I was uncaring. My cooking was all wrong, i.e. healthier than hot brown, overcooked, fatty, salt-laden mystery foods. My best Christmas present from her was an acrylic angel with the wrong birthstone from the dollar clearance bin. She kept giving me angel stuff, and I'm not even remotely religious. If I made suggestions, I was greedy and critical. We now live far away and no time or money to go visit. Sorry. My in-laws weren't terribly interested in me until I got pregnant. Suddenly, they were all about being in my business. They flooded us with unwanted advice and terrifying stories. "I stopped giving my sons formula at 3 months because it was too expensive and they're fine." Or when told that the hospital checks our car seat before release, "I remember bringing our oldest home from the hospital in my lap and he's fine." Mind you, I'm the same age as their oldest, car seats existed, and people like them are probably the reason the hospitals check now. Anyway, this escalated to invading personal space, which included talking to and kissing my belly, even before I had a bump. No matter how many times we told them not to do it, my mother-in-law would swoop in like a ninja when I least expected it. Come wintertime, I had a good-sized baby bump and a maternity coat to cover it. We were leaving the in-laws' house and I already had my coat zipped up, smugly thinking I'd found a way to defend myself. Much to my horror, she starts pawing at the bottom of my jacket and attempts to yank it up. When that doesn't work, she bends over and tries to kiss below the coat, completely misses the bump, and plants one right on the front of my pelvis. I'm frozen, going, "Your mother just kissed my VV," over and over. My husband says, "What the frick, ma?" She just shrugs, says she doesn't care, and walks away. 0 fricks given. Later, my husband negotiated that she just blows kisses from that point forward. Otherwise, I refused to see them. In conclusion, my mother-in-law tried to kiss my baby bump and instead planted one on my hoo-ha. I will note that I've tried to spread out the various charges against different kinds of in-laws, but upwards of 90% of these stories have been mothers-in-law. They just seem to be the most likely kind of crazy to get up in their children's spouse's business, I suppose. Cousins-in-law came to Thanksgiving the day after we buried my grandmother. They ignore her husband of 58 years who's sitting at the table, don't offer any condolences to any family members, and complain when we dedicate the goats to grandma, and not their 4th child with the 3rd husband. Also called me ignorant for not knowing who the American Idol winner was this year. The only saving grace here is that my wife knows how crazy her mum is and has gone no contact with her. Here are some things that happened in no particular order. The big one? Father-in-law, who's a pretty good guy, has MS and is basically bedridden. Mother-in-law has been consistently misdosing him on his medication, including giving him sedatives that she's gotten from somewhere. Her adult daughter and her husband moved in to help renovate the house to something that's more handicap accessible for my father-in-law. They spent nearly $20,000 in renovations, remodel and redecoration, along with new appliances for the kitchen. Without warning, my mother-in-law served them with an eviction notice, giving them 3 days to vacate. They live about 2 hours away. In the past 10 years, she's made 2 trips to actually see my daughter. There have been 3 or 4 more trips for things like going to garage sales, where she's made an hour or so visit as part of the trip. For my first Christmas with the extended family, she forgot to buy me a gift, so she went to the freezer and got me a summer sausage that had been in there for nearly 4 years. Nothing says welcome to the family like a ruined, frozen, smoked meat. For another Christmas, I got a giant bottle of Listerine and some toothbrushes. Mother-in-law works at the dentist office and liberated these gifts for me. She saved a ham in the refrigerator to make ham and potato soup. The ham had been in the fridge, not the freezer, for nearly 3 months, and she was still going to use it for the soup. Mother-in-law is making tons of money in land royalties from fracking. Sister-in-law recently saw a royalty check from the oil company and it was over $900,000. Yet mother-in-law won't spend any of that money to refurbish the house or pay someone to provide the kind of care that my father-in-law needs. She's all kinds of fricked up. Not technically my mother-in-law yet, but told me her daughter wasn't ready for a ring after we'd already picked it out and she was asking me when she was going to get it. A few months later, she was contemplating a cross-country move and said to my face if she left, there was no one here that her daughter would stay for. First words to her daughter when she told her of our pregnancy were, "How could you be so stupid? My fiancé is 30, we're doing well, live in the same place, and are due in August. Cut the cord with the mother-in-law." To clarify a bit, my husband was 12 to 16 and watched her alcoholic dad beat her mum. Her mum would in turn get in bed with her or sleep in her room to ride it out for the night. At 18, they divorced, and she went 5 years and received her master's. Came home and has been living with mum since. There is a bond, albeit unhealthy, that neither wants to break. Her mum is lonely, clinically depressed, and suffers from severe anxiety disorder. I've given her every option to slowly get away, which she seems to have no intention of doing. Our relationship is suffering, and I'm not really sure where it's heading. What I do know is that no matter the outcome, I will be the best father to my child that I can be. Actually building the baby's crib today. My in-laws came from a very, very rich family. They're rich enough to take a helicopter ride to another city in order to avoid traffic congestion. This one year, they told us to wait for them before starting dinner because they would like to join us. They promised to arrive at 7 p.m. They finally arrived at 9:15 p.m. 15 minutes later, they left, sister-in-law saying she wasn't feeling well and would like to return to their hotel to rest. We waited more than 2 hours for a 15-minute appearance act. Everyone was teed off. Oh boy, my time to shine. This will be a series of short stories. A little background. First, I'm Mexican-American and my wife is white. Also, her parents are divorced. 1. After she met me, her mother took my then-girlfriend into the kitchen and said she was dating below her. 2. After he first met me, my father was asked by his family what I was like. He only said, "He's a wetback." 3. Since I have now graduated from college, law school, passed the bar exam, and become a practicing attorney, my mother-in-law constantly belittles my wife. Most recently, during dinner, she stated that my wife has lowered her prestige in light of my accomplishments despite my race. 4. When my mother-in-law and her husband visited us for the first time after we got married, we found them in our bedroom uninvited and they were searching for something on our bed. We finally heard their hushed tones and realized they were looking for stains on the sheets. 5. The mother-in-law wanted us to all go to a small town in Alabama to see her family for Thanksgiving. So we went, me a little anxious about what to expect. It was a very awkward experience. I think I might have been the first Mexican they'd ever seen, and then we had Thanksgiving dinner. A relative started describing this program the city initiated, where people can provide aluminium cans in lieu of payment for bus fare. Mother-in-law's husband says, "Beer cans too? Y'all are going to be seeing a ton of Mexicans on the buses." Everyone fell on the floor laughing. My wife and I could only stare at each other in disbelief. 6. This Thanksgiving, mother-in-law and husband invited their contractor to dinner. He's from Colombia and has no family here, so I thought they were being friendly. When he arrived, husband kept trying to get us to speak Spanish to each other because us, being Spanish speakers, we would basically be family. When introducing him, mother-in-law said, "He's from Colombia, but we don't call him a terrorist," and started laughing. What was the best moments you've experienced while playing Dungeons & Dragons? The time we planned and executed a heist to steal a fortune belonging to our rogue's corrupt father. There was a lot involved, from using a magical bird familiar to recon the keep where the money was stored, to my shape-shifting character taking on the form of a guard to sneak some of us inside, to recruiting a posse of disgruntled locals to help us cart away numerous bars of silver and gold. But the best part was when, after we set off some magical alarms on our way out, the father rushed into his vault to check on his fortune and threw back the tarp covering his stack of gold and silver bars, only to find that the precious metal was all gone and the tarp was covering a live bear. Suddenly, bear. Did I mention it's a magic bear who often wears a sign saying, "Magic bear, do not eat"? As a willing forever DM, I would just like to say that I have been waiting with bated breath for this kind of story grouping to come up in my assignments. Huzzah! On to more D&D stories. My party went from revered heroes of the town they saved to hated outcasts with an official restraining order approved by the king himself when they tried to prank an old merchant and ended up murdering a beloved town elder, then trying to steal his mayorship. This sounds like someone had to roll more than a single one to accomplish that. Telling my party that the main archery store is called Target. Thinking about that brief pause followed by a few sighs and reluctant laughter still makes me crack up. My name was Doug Windchaser, but I insisted everyone call me Darkblade. Well, my whole party just kept calling me Dougblade or Duckblade or Dudblade. I had a similar experience. I told them my name was LV Sugartips. They thought I said sugar followed by a word for a female's chest. It never changed for months of playing, and I even have a mug with them from LV Sugar Chest. Safe to say, my character has been renamed without my permission. Ah yes, the old taser face conundrum. I once had a character called Guinevere. Everyone called her Gummy Bear. Somewhat inadvertently ended up stealing from and systematically dismantling a merchant family's bedding business across multiple cities. They were completely unrelated to the story, but we just kept bumping into them. They didn't happen to sell cabbages, did they? My character was a broken clock, right time of day kind of character. The type that would eat the only lit candle in a room just so the other party members wouldn't be able to see when they woke up. The highlight of our campaign came when I was having such crappy dice rolls that I decided to just aim for the space next to the enemy I was fighting to see what would happen. I rolled a 1, so I missed that space and hit the enemy instead. On my very first D&D session, our party was going on a treasure hunt and had just encountered a monster the DM liked to call a knuckle dragger or something like that. He had intended us to fight it like a boss battle, but before we fought, our paladin intimidated it to stand down for a turn, so we all got a free action. Or at least half of us would, since the DM rolled and said it was so hungry that it will only be stunned long enough that it will run on hunger alone. This worked great for my character. I play a sneaky human monk with literally no backbone to her and who is now trying really hard not to fight the giant ogre creature we were looking at. Just before we encountered it, we had raided a goblin camp which included having a whole bunch of jerky with us. My free action was to immediately offer this knuckle dragger all the jerky we've got so that maybe it would get full and no one would fight. Win-win. A few lucky rolls later, the fight ends before it began, with a healthily fed knuckle dragger, some level ups, and allowing us to skip a few more traps in the temple. We adopted him, by the way. His name is George. The paladin feeds him. I'll always be happy about the time my party ran into some goblins hauling oil into a ship. They opened up a barrel of oil and tossed some on the goblins, and then lit them on fire. The goblins, not being that dumb, jumped in the water. So then the party dumped oil, using a floating hand to cover a wide area, all over the water and lit that on fire too. What did those goblins ever do to you? The ship was a pirate ship that was essentially holding the town captive. The oil was actually one of the reasons the pirates were raiding, since it was in high demand in the pirate stronghold. The goblins were essentially deckhands and a hobgoblin was the captain. It was a pirate-heavy couple of sessions. Ah, pirates. Outlaws' lives are forfeit. Carry on. Why are acts of painful, Geneva Treaty violating murder so much funnier when they're carried out in this game? I may never know because pausing to work out would stop my games being so hilarious. More nautical hijinks to follow. I was DMing a campaign with a new group. Only one guy had ever played before, 5 players total. They had a ship and were traveling by sea to new quests and transporting some goods for cash when they landed. I had in mind to have them and their ship captured by pirates and have them escape later, so I sent 2 full warships at them full of pirates, hopelessly outnumbering them, thinking, "There's no way they can get out of this quest." They panicked. As the pirates got closer, arrows started flying. What did they do? Well, one of the goods they had was a high-alcohol grog, and they had a heck of a rogue archer. So they wrapped a couple of arrows in rope, dunked them, lit them, and fired them into the sails of the other ships. I made 3 separate rolls for the sequence of events between the hit, the rope holding up, and it successfully lighting up the other sails, per ship. And they fricking nailed it both times, on all accounts using teamwork and assists on skills. They burned 2 fully loaded, heavy pirate ships at sea using 2 arrows. I was in awe. I had to give them extra XP for their ingenuity. My players had to fight a dragon. They rolled shockingly well throughout the fight and were surprisingly winning. So being in the open, I had logically had the dragon flee. This was surprising given they were only level 3 and only bad rolls from the dragon had kept them alive. Most everyone got an attack of opportunity in or ran as it thrashed out of the tower, making it collapse, but the half-orc barbarian wasn't having any of it. She had a custom weapon from a special orc bad guy the party had fought. It was essentially a hook on a chain you could throw and drag people to you with, and her usual greatsword as a weapon. This will become relevant shortly. As the dragon flew up, she said she wanted to grapple it. Rolled, succeeded. Okay, you're holding onto its tail. She then spent the next couple of rounds as this massive dragon flew hundreds of feet into the air, climbing to the middle of its back. The dragon was rolling and thrashing, trying to throw her off, but she rolled great every time and hung in there. Then, she wanted to throw the hook and latch it onto the dragon's face or eye. Rolls a fricking 19. Hook lodged in the dragon's eye, and now she's riding it through the air like a venom-breathing bull at the world's scariest rodeo. Then she started hacking at the dragon's wing. At this point, she's like 300 feet in the air and is expecting this to just be a badass way to kill herself. First attack hits, okay damage. Second attack crits, almost max damage. I say that the wing shears free in a gout of blood, the brittle wing bones splintering under the mighty blow. Now she's riding an almost dead dragon as it plummets to the earth from a height that would kill anything like a green Slim Pickens, planning to go out in a blaze of glory. As the dragon and orcs smash into a building in the town, the other PCs run there to surely find their friend dead. Well, half-orcs have a feature that makes them particularly hard to kill, and I figured the spirits she worshipped would be pretty gosh darn impressed by such a move, so I gave her one last chance. Roll a con save with disadvantage. For non-D&D players, this means you roll 2 20-sided dice and take the worst of the 2 rolls. First roll is a natural 20, everyone is laughing, saying if only it wasn't at disadvantage. Second roll, another fricking natural 20. Table loses its mind. The other characters dig through the rubble, and among what is left of the splattered dragon, they find a barely alive, unconscious half-orc barbarian with a giant grin frozen on her face. I ruled even with healing magic, she'd be so wounded she needed a week to recover, so the party had to drag her around in a cart for a while. But thus began the reoccurring legend of Ure the Dragon Slayer through my games. Using spring-loaded gauntlets meant for deploying quickly hidden daggers to house and launch small snakes at enemies, and the look on everyone's faces when I did this. Party was fighting Orcus, final fight of our entire campaign. Fate of the universe resting on our hands. My bard had an ability that allowed me to replace up to 4 rolls with whatever I roll. Since it was just based on enemies in an area of effect, I was able to get 2 in each time. We kept a minion alive just for this. I also had an ability that allowed me to re-roll any d20 I roll 3 times a day, so I cheesed the frick out of those 3 abilities. Orcus ended up getting dominated, crit himself because I rolled a nat 20, and replaced his attack roll with it, made him fail his save with a super low roll. Then did the roll thing again, crit him again, and made him fail. So he was essentially hitting himself for 3 rounds of combat, 2 of them being crits. He died from hitting himself, and my DM was visibly just, "God damn it." I'm not super good at the roleplay aspect of the game. I'm a new player, just under a year of playing, but my group disbanded after college ended. Anyway, my party was in a fight from a set-up stealth mission gone wrong. One person was unconscious, the other struggling, and I had the big muscular barbarian attacking me. My DM said he was a Russian Armstrong from Fullmetal Alchemist. I was pretty low on HP, and no potions or healing spells as the unconscious player was the cleric. Out of a random turn of events, I asked the DM if instead of attacking, I could use a charisma check to flirt with him. He said, sure. By the way, my character was male. Rolled a natural 20. We made out for 2 turns, and on the 3rd turn, I failed my roll, so he stopped kissing me and attacked me. On my next turn, I said, as my character, "I can't believe you. I thought you were different than the rest, that you and I could make all this fighting come to a standstill by the others, seeing the true love you and I had for each other. I see that you just used me for personal gain and tossed me aside like common trash. I've never felt so abused in my entire life." Started crying and dashed away from battle. My DM said, "He technically has an attack of opportunity to use on you, but he's not gonna use it." The other player convinced the enemy I made out with to come after me and beg for forgiveness. And he managed to take out one of the 2 people fighting him, and since the big barbarian had left, the other one got scared and ran. So we ended up winning the fight, I guess? The barbarian enemy became an unintended love interest for the next while, all because I didn't want my character to die. The old bard seducing an unlikely enemy trope. Even my biggest horn dog of a bard character has never gone so far as to try this, but I salute you for succeeding, my good fellow player. I always play with the same group of friends. They're good friends, but not the greatest D&D PCs. Said friends also have a tendency for their characters to change motivations rapidly without reason, even occasionally based on out-of-game info. I love my friends, but my patience was running thin with their "play whatever is the most convenient" attitude. In our most recent adventure, our party was mostly good, my witch being the lone, unknown holdout. Over the course of 3 to 4 play sessions, 6+ hours each, my witch began dragging each of the other characters towards evil. It started with simple acts like convincing the druid to summon squirrels to disarm a trap laid for us, and culminated in a cruel torture scene where I burned a man alive from the inside out to get info on our next target. After the deed was completed and no one stepped in to stop me, our DM announced that the entire team would have to shift their alignments to evil. They were all complicit and could no longer claim to be good. It was so satisfying to see my fellow PCs realize that the actions they took in character would have meaning, and they could not claim to be good while committing evil acts. Everyone's playstyle has evolved significantly since that point. Did you cackle in a suitable manner? You're gosh darn right I did. It was incredibly satisfying to watch them struggle with the implications it had on their characters. And for the record, I wasn't attempting to strip them of their agency. I only convinced the DM to change their alignment because they had the choice to stand up against me on multiple occasions, and time again decided to say and do nothing. I wanted them to show me how good they were, but there wasn't much to show. One of our party fell into a river while we were crossing the ford. She rolled a 1, a critical danger roll, and fell into the rapids and was washed downstream. Our DM was lenient about it and really didn't want her character to die yet, as it was our first epoch of the game. So he said to her, "Roll to see if you can cling onto a branch and pull yourself out." She rolls a 1. DM is like, "Okay, so the branch broke and you're getting pulled further downstream. Roll again to see if you can swim to shore." She rolls a 1. DM, "Wow, okay, so you see a bridge coming up. Roll to see if you can hang on to the side and pull yourself out." She rolls a 1. DM, "Are you kidding me? Okay, you missed the bridge, but there's an island in the river and you reach it exhausted. Up to you guys to see if you want to rescue her." Everybody agrees. We throw a rope to her to get her back across. DM, "Okay, so roll to see if you grab the rope." She rolls a 2. DM, "Okay, so roll again." Rolls a 3. "This is insane. Okay, roll a D8 to see if you grab the rope." She rolls a 6. DM, "Hooray! The team pulls you to shore. You survive. Somehow. You have acquired a new nickname, Toe Rag the Luckless." Probably when we met a friendly yet clearly evil lich in a tower. The poor paladin, the only good-aligned character in a party of mostly evil, slightly trolly players, of course attacked him before we could talk to him and work out whatever we were here for. Whatever, all good with us, we helped him kill the lich. Then we discovered that he would only stay dead for so long. That just didn't sit right with us, so we prepared his tower a bit. We upper-decked his toilets, pooped on his coffee table, drew a picture of a horse doing the deed with a person on his door, we labeled the horse us and the person you, took the door off its hinges, raised the tower, destroyed its foundation, defecated on the rubble, and then left the door on top of the debris. All of this, of course, over the objections of our noble paladin, who just wanted to rid the world of evil. The direction the campaign took did not allow the character to come back, but I'm still expecting some GM retribution in a future game for that one. Totally worth it. My first campaign was with some twisted but hilarious friends. We had a couple of people with really high charisma and used the local townsfolk in unspeakable but efficient ways. At one point, we were accompanied by a local dwarven smith, with a martial past of some sort, and we needed to explore a creepy cathedral. Having heard some horrible skittering coming from the entrance, none of us wanted to go first, so we got the dwarf drunk and spoke of glory to be won in leading a courageous charge. Not content to simply scout, we also managed to hide several bottles of highly flammable liquid on him, for after the great victory, and poured a drink over him for luck. When he made his brave and glorious charge, a fire arrow in the back turned him into a rather unwilling bomb, and cleared out a nasty nest of spiders that lay in wait. Our paladin was lawful good, but also hopelessly gullible, and went along with our depraved deeds without complaint. Our second and more horrible transgression was just soon after this fiery escapade, when we used a local boy who'd been helping us to find his friend as a fishing lure to draw out the queen spider from a pit that looked like certain death to enter. We all set up with bows and some large pieces of rubble at the mouth of the hole, lowered in the poor hapless fellow and dropped everything we had on the spider queen when she came to claim the morsel. Unfortunately, we were only able to recover the bottom half of the lad, but our entirely amoral and lecherous druid declared, "Well, at least we've got the good half." The druid and I were the Oakenrod brothers, an incestuous pair that used every opportunity to slip in references to our somewhat deviant ways. As we found out later, our dearly departed dwarf actually had quite the kinky dungeon beneath his house, and we were sure to make proper use of the facilities for our raucous lovemaking as soon as the group left us alone in the house. I think the DM left that day a little stunned by what he had witnessed. This isn't quite the most murder hobo-y group of murder hobos to ever murder hobo, but it sure sits in the upper quartile of them. They still don't compare to the games I ran for kids, who were on a remarkable level when it came to lacking morality, although they didn't do quite so much adult stuff with each other. My players were trying to get a free room with a Thieves Guild password discount. The rogue knew the password because she'd infiltrated the guild, but when the group was asked the password, the rogue refused to tell them. The other two party members panicked and said super confidently, "Dip, dip, potato chip." Laughing my butt off, I decided that was worth 50% off the room, so the guild let them in. Starting a new campaign with new characters, my buddy decided to play as a Goliath paladin. Our characters were meeting at a tavern for a job. He decided that instead of walking through the door, he was going to kick it down. Fails the strength check with a +4. Twice. After being thoroughly humiliated and teeing off the barkeep by cracking the doorframe, he tries to enter the door normally. Our DM has him roll dexterity because he's like 10 feet tall. Natural 1. He smacks his head on the top of the doorframe and passes out. My party was en route to an island off the mainland that held a quest we needed to handle. On the ride, our DM decided to have us roll history to see if we knew anything about the island. 2 of us critically failed. My character no longer believed the island existed and was sure we would fall through the island when it finally came into view. Our bard believed it was full of big-chested Goliath girls. Another time, our DM had us roll for dreams. I critically failed, and our Goliath rolled a natural 20. His dreams invaded my own, and I had to sleep to him engaging in night-long festivities with other big-chested Goliath girls. The next day, I rolled pretty low on a charisma check at the blacksmith, and my character randomly yelled, "I see Goliath wangs in my dreams!" Good times. So far, all we've done was make our characters and a few scenes, but it was so fun coming up with random names that weren't so random, like Parry Hotter and Rilo Ken. Alcohol and lots of Monty Python references were involved. First time I played D&D, I played a chaotic knight. My character would do the most random crap possible, and the rest of the group thought it was ridiculous. One of the quests is to explore a cave, and before we explore it, the entire group rested up outside the cave, and one person takes watch. My character decides that he isn't going to watch over the group, and goes to the entrance of the cave and digs a giant hole and covers it, then comes back to the camp. Everyone that I was playing with was literally thinking, what the frick? So, long story short, we explore the cave, kill all the people, and almost defeat the main bad guy. But the DM decides that the bad guy flees from the cave, and I remind the DM that I want to roll for the bad guy to fall in the ditch and die. I roll a natural 20, and the bad guy falls into the hole and dies. The DM is teed off. Everyone in the group is dying of laughter because my character's idiotic nature saved the quest. In Pathfinder, there's the time I started a prison riot with nothing but the message spell and some good bluff rolls. So we were planning to break the whole party out of prison, and to do that we needed to distract the guards. My character, a catfolk sorcerer with the Rakshasa bloodline, gets the bright idea to get the prisoners fighting among themselves. One of the powers of the Rakshasa bloodline that's available at creation is the ability to give yourself a +5 bonus on bluff checks a number of times a day equal to 3 plus your charisma modifier. This character's modifier was +4, so it could be used a total of 7 times a day. Bluff is a class skill for a sorcerer, and we were playing at first level, so I had a rank in it for a total of 8 points in it. But I was also using the Clever Cat racial feature, which gives a +2 to bluff, diplomacy, and sense motive. A total of +10. So all in all, up to 7 times a day, I could roll bluff with a +15 bonus at first level. Now, with that context established, this prison had anti-magic crystals in it because the dwarfs running it aren't stupid, but I managed to make all of my rolls to successfully cast my spells through the anti-magic. I start imitating the voices of people using the message spell. Message isn't telepathic, it produces an audible sound which seems like a whisper to anyone who isn't directly intended for. So, people are looking at each other like, "What the frick did you just say to him?" because they think they hear a dwarf mumble something rude about how small a minotaur is in their area. Soon, chaos breaks out and I'm just standing in the mess hall, looking innocent while the rest of the party tries to grab gear and take out the guards. It was hilarious and it made me fall in love with the character. Our party had been temporarily deputized so we could help catch some criminals. We got these little badges we could flash to get access to parts of the city we shouldn't have been able to go. Our rogue, being a typical rogue, decided he wanted to rob a particularly hefty-looking coin purse from someone at a tavern. He manages to hand the bag off to someone else in our party, but he's cornered by the private security of the person he stole it from. We picked a bad target. This person was important. Thinking quickly, my bard grabs our rogue, wrestles him to the ground, and flashes his badge. I convince them I'm an undercover cop and we've been tailing this guy. I proceed to arrest our rogue and contact the real police to come handle the search for the stolen purse. Our party ties the rogue up, drags him out of the tavern, and skips town with a purse full of diamonds before the real police get there. We could have chatted this person up, learned they were a famous jewel dealer, and gone on some big quest to help them in exchange for riches, but instead we Ocean's 11'd that crap and we were never heard from again. Have you ever witnessed a birth that was clearly a result of a cheating spouse? It wasn't at the birth, but I used to work for a urologist who did vasectomies. He did a vasectomy on a guy, then did the requisite 3-month and 6-month fertility follow-up test to make sure it worked. The 6-month test showed no sperm, so the guy was all set to not father children. Fast forward 2 years and he calls my surgeon fuming, ranting and raving about how they messed up the vasectomy and now his wife is pregnant. So Doc orders another fertility analysis. Of course, it comes back totally negative. A very awkward conversation ensued in the exam room that I'd have paid anything to eavesdrop on. The best part is, the couple left the office teed off, with the wife sticking to her story that she would never cheat on her husband, and the husband in complete denial that she'd ever lie about that. Last I heard, they were gearing up to sue or something, but I don't work there anymore, so I don't know what happened. Not 100% sure how those tests go, but I just laughed out loud at the thought of some dude angrily tugging away like, "Not my kid, I'll show you." These stories remind me of something I experienced firsthand the day after my son was born. Nurse: "So, your baby's blood type is A negative. Wife: "Like me." Nurse: "And daddy?" Me: "No, I'm an A+. Nurse: "You must be mistaken. That combination isn't possible. I'll leave you guys to it." Me: pulls out phone and frantically Googles baby blood type combinations. Disclosure: the nurse was wrong. "Props for checking first before attacking your wife." Yep, that's why he checked first, but if he attacked her straight away like some guys in these stories, they'd have one hell of a marriage to repair afterwards. A patient asked if both possible fathers could be in her C-section so that neither would miss the birth of his child. They'd figure out the details later. After a lot of careful consideration, because it did seem like a semi-reasonable plan, the answer was no because it was too easy to imagine many scenarios in which a fight might break out in the OR and instruments go flying. Also, there's a pretty strict rule about only one person allowed with the patient in the OR. In the end, she brought her mum. You know what? Out of all the outcomes here, I think they definitely settled on the most sensible one. Possibly the only sensible decision leading up to that baby. Who knows? We don't know the full story. A friend of mine went through it. He went down a dark path of substances and we'd lost touch after a big fight about how he was messed up all the time and he was wasting his life. He contacted me out of the blue to say that I was right. He needed to step up and be responsible, and that he'd quit everything cold turkey because he was going to be a dad. Apparently, he was going to help his girl get sober and they were going to have this kid and get married. He really got his crap together over the course of the pregnancy. He was clean, got a job, and got a nice place to live. She was not so dedicated. She continued to use all kinds of substances throughout the pregnancy. She ended up going into labor early at 26 weeks. She gave birth to a premature, addicted baby boy. He went directly into the NICU. She stayed at the hospital and visited the NICU until she was released. She then disappeared. She never visited the baby, never called to check on it, didn't go home, just fell off the face of the planet. He, however, spent every spare second at the NICU with that baby. However, as the weeks passed, it became pretty obvious that the baby wasn't his, as skin tone evened out and hair came in. Chick was blonde with blue eyes. My friend is super pale blonde with blue eyes as well. The baby was clearly half Hispanic. He wanted to adopt the baby, but they wouldn't let him. The state took it and it went into foster care. It totally messed him up for a long time. He relapsed for a while and got into a bad car accident. He spent some time in the hospital and then got everything back together. He's married now to a really nice girl and rapidly had 4 kids that are his with another currently on the way. Isn't that just the worst thing? What was so different about him than any other potential adoptive parents? At least he'd been there the whole time. At least he cared. Did they really think putting the baby into a convoluted foster system was the best thing for him? Glad the dude's doing well, though. Probably his history with addiction, which may have come with some legal troubles, which worsens the situation in the eyes of CPS. When I was born, my father was 100% certain that I was not his because his blood type and my mum's blood type couldn't have produced me. He punched a hole in the wall in the hospital and yelled at my mum refusing to sign the birth certificate because I have A-positive blood. My mum has 0 negative and he was positive that he had AB negative because that's what his brand new dog tags said. He was in the army at the time. Turns out they'd misprinted his dog tags. All his old tags said A-positive. In conclusion, a typo on my dad's army-issued dog tags almost caused my parents to divorce. To be fair, a misprint like that could kill him in other ways. But it's absolutely possible for an O-negative and an AB-negative parent to have an A-negative baby. Like the only 2 blood types that couple could produce are A-negative and B-negative? Do you mean you've got an A-positive blood type? I'm not a doctor, but when my godson was born, the nurse told us about this guy who had gotten 2 girls pregnant at the same time. They both wound up in the hospital just down the hall from each other, giving birth hours apart. What a lucky guy. When my mother was giving birth to my little sister, my paternal aunt was also giving birth to my cousin in the same hospital. My dad was back and forth between the 2 rooms often enough to get some looks from the hospital staff. Funny story that reminds me of this. My husband, then boyfriend, was in the process of getting divorced when I found out I was pregnant. His soon-to-be ex-wife found out a month later she was also pregnant from a guy she'd had a one-night stand with, not my husband. Prior to this, she was refusing to sign divorce papers because she hoped to reconcile even if he did have a pregnant girlfriend. Obviously, it wouldn't work out since she got knocked up by another guy, so she finally signed them. The similar part is that our due dates were 11 days apart. We had the same obstetrician and were set to deliver at the same hospital. My company switched insurances a week before I was due, and I got to pick a different hospital. Wouldn't you know it, we went into labor hours apart and delivered on the same day. Our obstetrician had to deliver my son first and then run across town to deliver her son. The OB did a double take when he saw my ex's family show up to visit her late after visiting us. They were the, "He may have divorced her, but we didn't" mind. His sister even stayed when she delivered to be her support buddy, even though she was officially with the one-night stand guy and his family was there. Our OB told us that may have been the most Jerry Springer thing she'd seen in a while. My friend was the delivery nurse for the hospital that all high-risk pregnancies go to. They're extremely busy and she's brought a lot of people into the world. She once delivered a baby in the parking lot by herself. This has come up on a weekly basis, but she shared the best story with us. A Caucasian couple come in and the mother is in labor. When the dude is filling out paperwork, the mother takes the doctor aside. She tells him there is a chance that the baby may be a different race than the father and to let her know as soon as the baby is born. The baby is born. The doctor turns to the mother and announces loudly, "Congratulations on your white baby boy." Well, this is fun. My wife's cousin, third, came out black. She's married to the pastiest Irish guy you can find. Their marriage didn't end, but this has created an interesting story. Grandma tells everyone that he is really just Native American. Her husband was half Native. He's now 15 and still no one in the family will admit that he's black. One of my colleagues in anesthesia once placed an epidural in a heavily tattooed lady. Apparently she had Steve's lunchbox tattooed above her hoo-ha. She gave birth. The OB-GYN turned to the father in the room and said, "Congratulations, Steve." The guy stated, "My name isn't Steve." No meltdowns or anything, just an awkward moment. That is brilliant. Also, what a tattoo to commit to. Clearly some misplaced faith in the longevity of a former partner's relationship. That'll be a painful one to remove. My mum is a labor and delivery nurse. One time she had a patient whose parents were present during her stay at the hospital. The staff there have a whiteboard with some general information about the patients like blood type, time spent in the wing, and like how far along. This information is nameless for HIPAA reasons and instead has a patient's number. So this patient happened to be the only one in the wing at the time. Her father was walking back from the cafeteria at one point and noticed the board. He stopped one of the nurses and asked if the blood type for the patient on the board was correct. He knew his daughter was the only patient there. It was B positive. The nurse confirmed it was correct. Turns out he knew his and his wife's blood type. He was O positive and his wife was A negative. The combination will never yield a B-positive baby. He brings his wife out and just points to the board, and this look of shock washes over her. In conclusion, father of patient in labor finds out his wife cuckolded him 25 years later by knowing his blood type Punnett squares. Did he draw the squares in the whiteboard? I would have totally done that. Funny story, I ran a lab in college, and we were teaching the kids about blood types. Kid insists that his parents were a certain type of blood and that his square had to be wrong. Came to find out he was adopted and had just found out through basic bio. Poor kid. I'm white and my wife is black. I'm a frog belly fluorescent white, think ginger light. My wife is earthy brown. No one would ever describe her as light-skinned. We have a daughter. She had a difficult labor and our daughter was delivered via C-section. She did not really get to see our daughter immediately after delivery. Later in our room she was dozing and they brought our daughter in. My relatives and my wife's relatives all commented on how my daughter looked so much like me and was not even close to the pigmentation of my wife. So I carried my daughter over to my wife and gently woke her and showed her our daughter, and said, "I don't think she's yours." We all had a good laugh. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My friend told me this story of hers. Woman and her husband were having their first child and it was the friend's first ever delivery, OB-GYN. When she got the baby out, she looked at it, then looked at the parents and asked, "Okay, which of you has 6 fingers?" The mother broke down crying, yelling "I'm sorry" to the husband. Their neighbor apparently has 6 fingers. Did the father begin a lifelong quest to bring the 6-fingered man to justice? That is inconceivable. When my wife was born, she was very yellow and the nurse quietly asked her mum about the paternity when the dad was out of the room. She was just born with a bad case of jaundice and that nurse was an idiot. "My husband is half Mexican and I'm of Native American ancestry. We both look pretty white though. When our son was born, he had plenty of the blackest hair and looked very yellow. They kept saying he was jaundiced. He was in the NICU for other reasons, but the tests didn't show elevated bilirubin. We kept asking when he could leave the NICU room with us as his condition improved. But 2 of the nurses kept insisting that he was also jaundiced and that they'd need to clear that first as my milk came in or through supplementation, using it like a threat to get me to supplement. Finally, my husband said, "He's not jaundiced, he's Mexican, damn it," and left the room. It was first time I laughed out loud in 5 days. The nurse was so flustered. My best friend's stepbrother was that guy who found out he wasn't the father because the baby was black. I'll try to make it short. Dude had gone to rehab twice and was doing really well. He came back home for a weekend and screwed his ex-girlfriend. Left and went back to his home state to continue his newfound life. Got the call that she was pregnant and dropped everything to come back and be a father. We were really worried he would relapse, but he was great. So 9 months of preparation goes by, he was going to be an awesome dad. All worries about relapsing were gone and he seemed ready to become the best dad he could ever be. Baby comes out, everyone's happy. Nurse takes him aside and after a few minutes says, "I want to ask you something. You do know that's not your kid, right?" He says, "What do you mean?" "Well, that baby is at least half black, but the pigments are probably going to really darken." So he goes over to his ex-girlfriend and asks if there's any way what the nurse told him is true. She starts sobbing and breaks down completely. Admits that she screwed someone else right around the time he came back. So he says, "All right, I'm glad you and the baby are healthy. Have a nice life." Walks into the waiting room where all the grandparents are waiting. Cheers, celebration. Everything good? Yep. Healthy baby, healthy mom. I'm not the father. I'm out of here. And walked right out the freaking door. The girl's parents even wanted him to pay and support. He moved back to where he got his life back together and is doing incredibly well. But man, I wish he had all that time back. At least he only wasted 9 months. If she had banged a white guy, they might not have noticed for 18 years. This is clearly an incredibly complex and nuanced problem. She was single and clearly shouldn't be judged for behaving as such, but maybe be upfront about seeing other people around the same time? Or with hindsight being 20/20, use protection. This story sucks for everyone involved. This one's about my mum. She had my brother when she was only about 16 and had a very hard birth with him. Back in that time, the husband wasn't allowed in the labor room and my grandma was at work. When my brother was born, he got stuck, so they had to use forceps and he was also jaundiced, so he looked like an Asian baby. My grandma turns up after work and is looking at all the babies in the room where they were kept and asks which one was her daughter's baby. The nurse points to my brother, and him, looking all Asian, my grandma storms up to my mum in the ward and said, "Which Asian guy did you sleep with?" Well, my mum thought she was joking, so she said, "I don't know, it was too dark to see." My grandma then proceeded to hit my mother until a nurse came in and explained. My brother is now 44 and as white can be. So I'm an NICU nurse that was floating to the nursery. A baby was born with a specific genetic abnormality, he had one missing limb, but was otherwise doing fine. The pediatrician was in the parents' room discussing with them the follow-up type stuff for the baby, appointments with a geneticist, an orthopedic surgeon, etc. At some point in the conversation, the mother asked what the baby's blood type was, to which the pediatrician responded with A positive. The father of the baby insisted that was impossible, as he and his wife, this was their third baby, were both O negative. The pediatrician got totally flustered and came back to the nursery to verify the lab's results. The baby really was A positive. We even went so far as to redraw the baby's blood and retest it. Nope, A positive. There is absolutely no chance that the baby belonged to that man. The husband left the hospital soon after and didn't show up again until it was time to pick up the mum and the baby to bring them home. The mum spent the rest of the hospital stay lying alone in the dark, mostly hiding under the covers. My aunt is white and so was her husband. He passed a while ago. When they finally had a kid, my cousin was black. The family decided to ignore it, my uncle included. This was 1989, and to gain my young teen cooperation, I got an early Christmas gift, a Sega Genesis. Love my cousin. Not me, but this was an odd one that I heard because I casually knew one of the parents. The father, to be exact. He came in freaking out because his wife had a kid. Well, he was white, she was white. The kid was born with a very dark skin tone. He instantly dumps her and starts filing for divorce. She has no idea what the heck happened. She forces a DNA test on him before she'll do anything. 3 months later, well, turned out it was his kid. Her parents, his parents, everyone, think he is a butthead. His mother apparently had a black grandmother. So the genes came through extra strong somehow in their kids so many generations down the line. Safe to say they're going through a heck of a lot of therapy. She never cheated on him and he never believed her despite all her serious protests. Been about a year now and it's better but still not perfect. This happened to my brother's friend. His mother didn't tell him his father was black, so he grew up believing he was white. He got his girlfriend pregnant and the baby came out looking more black than he did. He stormed out, broke up with her, and kicked her out. After that, he confided in his mother about the situation, and that's when she broke the news to him. He felt like a butt and a half. She took him back, but he had to work for it. She was, of course, hurt by his accusations. But as far as I know, they're still together. My dad was a doctor and he never told me about any meltdowns, but he told me they would deliver a lot of babies for unprepared parents. Teenagers, mums and dads with obvious substance or alcohol problems, legal problems, etc., generally not ready to raise a kid. For every one of those risky couples, it was usually teen parents who were 16 or 17, he would take a picture of the new mum and dad together holding the baby a couple of hours after the birth. Then a few weeks later, he would send the picture to them with a short note about how they'll make great parents and the baby is counting on them and just inspiring words in general. He has a whole photo album of the new mums and dads holding their baby in the delivery room when he was a doctor. And I have to say, it is some outstanding photography. Amazing stuff. And to tie these stories off with something a bit more heartwarming, let's have a nice long saga from small town Illinois. I heard this from an old client who was an obstetrician. He was telling me stories about when he used to deliver babies at people's homes way back in the day. This was probably 15 years ago when he told me this story, and he was in his 80s. 83 if I recall correctly. Anyway, he was telling me about his son, and I asked if he delivered his own son. He said yes, and told me the most amazing, heartbreaking, and heartwarming story. In the late 1940s, the town ambulance/hearse/taxi pulls up at his little independent practice out in the boonies of Illinois. A volunteer firefighter comes in and says they have a lady in labor and they won't make it to the hospital, which is over an hour away. He tells them to bring her in. He delivers the baby and mum passes out. They clean her up, they clean up the baby. All seems normal. The mum wakes up and the doctor comes in to give her the baby. She starts screaming, "Get it away from me!" He's all confused and can't figure out what's going on. She keeps flailing around and screaming that she doesn't want to look at it. The doc takes the baby out back and comes back. She's calmer but still looks frantic and terrified. He talks to her and she just stares at him like he's got 9 heads. He finally asks, "Well, what do you want me to do with your son?" The mum stays silent for a long time, and as he's getting up to leave, she quietly says, "Can you get rid of him?" The doc asks what she means. She says, "Just make him maybe go to sleep so he won't wake up." He said it took everything for him not to beat this woman to death right there and then. He went off on a tangent about how much he loved his work, working with all the new mothers in these little towns full of salt-of-the-earth people with great family values. On and on about how happy it made him bringing life into the world, and this woman wanted him to murder her baby. He asked why, and she ended up saying that her husband is in the military and it's not his baby. She couldn't let him find out. He kind of understood her rationale for not letting her husband know, but murder? So he suggested family, an orphanage, and other options back then, none of which seemed appealing in my mind. She said no to all of them because she couldn't risk this coming back to haunt me. He told her he'd see what he could do, and he let her rest. The next day, he tried talking to her again, and she was just more adamant about making it sleep. She said she wanted to hold her baby. He refused since he thought she'd try to kill him herself. She went nuts. In the end, he sent her home and told her that he had given the baby to his brother, who was a pastor and was unable to have children. He promised he'd never tell anyone, even the kid, who she was. Then he said he taught her a lesson. If she ever found herself pregnant again, she would come to him whether it was her husband's or not. If he ever found out she went elsewhere, he'd tell everyone the story. He said he did this because he was afraid she'd get knocked up and kill the next one. And he knew he'd find out if she went elsewhere because he was the only baby doctor for 5 towns around and knew other doctors at the hospitals. Of course, she could have delivered at home on her own, now that I think about it. She never had any other kids as far as the doc knew. And he said he did check up on her once or twice with his colleagues. Supposedly she died from a substance overdose a few years later. The doctor and his wife raised that baby as their own son. His wife wasn't able to have kids. The pastor brother was just BS, and it was to make her think he'd already given the baby away. He eventually told his son a very watered-down version of the story when the kid was older. The kid ended up becoming a plastic surgeon and has like 9 kids of his own. He's doing very well, he's very happy, and he probably would have never had a shot had that small-town fireman tried to press on to the hospital and wound up delivering the kid in the middle of nowhere. He was convinced she would have delivered and then smothered the baby by the time they got to the hospital. In conclusion, lady gets pregnant by another man. Her husband has no idea because he's in the military. She ends up at a small-town doctor and wants the doc to kill the baby so her husband doesn't find out. Doc raises the baby with his barren wife, and the baby grows up to be a brilliant surgeon who gives the doc tons of grandkids and a huge family he never would have had otherwise. Medical professionals. What's the best reaction you've seen from a dad during the birth of his child? I've been told that my dad's response to my entering this world was, "It's a person." I was born in the 80s and the ultrasound technology wasn't that great. What my parents didn't know was that instead of 1 baby, there were 2. Our hearts were beating at the same time and they could never really tell the gender, so they thought it was just 1 baby. So I came out. Then my mum says, "Doc, I still feel pain." And he looks and says, "I see another head." Apparently my father said, "What the frick? Whose baby is that?" And then my sister popped out. They were obviously floored. When I was born, my dad pulled out a Sharpie and drew a star at the bottom of my foot to make sure they didn't lose me. Fun fact, if you do that to a premature baby, it can leave a permanent tattoo, because the skin isn't done yet. The more you know. So if I wrote "Made in China" on a preemie baby's foot. I was a C-section baby. A couple of years ago, the topic came up with my parents while drinking. I mentioned that this sounds kind of gross. My father looks me right in the eye and says, "Have you ever seen Alien? It was just like that." I've seriously threatened my wife with watching the Alien trilogy while she was pregnant. I almost passed out at the first C-section. We named our eldest daughter Ripley as her ultrasound photo made it look like she would emerge teeth and claws flailing. When I was born, my father, who's a gynecologist himself, came from watching me do my big entrance, or exit depending on how you look at it, and said to my mum, "You're not gonna believe what you just did. I was over 10 pounds at birth." For some reason, when they mentioned that their father was a gynecologist, I imagined him holding up a judge's number rating once the baby came on out of there. I don't know why, other than that his job would make him maybe a little more detached from the emotion of it all. Some more comments to follow. My uncle was 13 pounds when he was born in the late 1930s. My grandmother was 5'1" tall and he was her first child. That woman had a uterus and a hoo-ha of steel. No other explanation. Apparently she couldn't feel her legs properly for about 3 months afterwards. I was 11 pounds even. My mom came so close to breaking my dad's arm, they gave her a rolled-up blanket to squeeze instead. Luckily, I was a pretty quick birth, 5 hours, I believe. My dad went to the hospital to visit me and my mom at the time. After hearing a baby's screams so loud you could hear it in the elevator, he turns to the nurse with a silly grin on his face and tells her, "Well, this one has quite the vocal cords. I'm feeling sorry for his parents already." She turns to him and tells him, trying not to laugh, "You're telling me, it's yours." My dad missed my birth because he was choking on a sandwich. Like he was super excited and choked, or just an unfortunate coincidence? My dad missed my birth because he was buying a lottery ticket one state over. My parents weren't married and I was unplanned, and if my mum is telling the truth, he didn't want me at first and had wanted her to get a termination. It was only until after he held me for the first time that he realized he wanted me. And he's been a very good dad, thankfully. A story comes to mind of a friend who, when his son was born, just started crying hysterically and hugged everyone. The doctor, nurses, he even ran out into the hallway and hugged people visiting other patients. Always makes me smile when I think of it. My friend told me his story. He was born with the umbilical cord wrapped around his neck. So, he was a little purple when he was born. His mum couldn't see what he looked like. His dad told her, "He looks like a California raisin." I actually had the reverse problem. I was hyperoxygenated and was red. My dad actually said, "Put this one back, she's not done yet." My husband cuddled our first son because I wanted him to have something with his son I could never have. I saw him holding this red, wrinkly, swaddled little baby and said, "Oh, look, they dressed up a potato like Mother Teresa." My dad is a carpenter and was at work when he was told that my mum was in labor with me. His reaction? He went into a shocked stupor and accidentally shot his thumb with a nail gun. And that's the story of why my then 11-year-old sister had to fill out my birth certificate. Did she get to name you too? Be honest, is your name Poohface on your birth certificate? My friend got to name his little brother, named him Leonardo after a ninja turtle. My birth was both a terrifying and wonderful day at the same time. My mother hemorrhaged pretty badly, so my dad had this turbulent hour in which he was both crying with joy over the birth of his first child and also with terror at the thought of losing his wife. The doctors wouldn't let him back in the room while they were trying to save my mum's life. So apparently for this hour, all he did was pace the hallways outside the room holding me, and refusing to let anyone else near me, as if he was already preparing for it to just be me and him. My dad has never stopped being an utterly devoted and emotional father. To all those who asked, yes, my mother survived. At a forceps delivery last night, the dad-to-be was so horrified and impressed by the amount of pain his wife had gone through during her labor that he phoned up his own mum to say, "Thanks." I'm afraid to ask. Forceps delivery? Baby won't come out easily from the birth canal, so the doctor grabs its head with forceps and helps out. Usually leaves little dents because the baby's head is soft, but those straighten out afterwards. Note, usually straighten out afterwards. Multiple Redditors still retain scars and elongated heads. Thanks for the nightmares, guys. I think I finally decided to never give birth. When I was born after 13 hours of labor, my dad looked at my full head of black hair and blue eyes, looked at my mum and said, "Are you sure she's mine?" My grandfather was the one the nurses let carry me back to my room post-cleanup, and when my mum asked if I was okay, he said, "Yeah, I don't think the extra 2 toes will be a big hindrance," which led to my mum frantically tearing the blankets off to check my toes. Basically, the men in my family are buttholes. My brother was born about a year after me, and my mother had gone into false labor so many times that she only knew she was really in labor when she couldn't sleep that night. Anyways, later at the hospital, the doctor said that she was going to be in labor for a lot longer. So he went and ate dinner. She wasn't in labor for much longer. My grandmother delivered the kid and was holding him when a nurse walks by and says, "You can't do that." My grandmother retorts with, "Well, I'm not going to put it back. That doesn't sound like a very good nurse to me." No, that doesn't sound like a very good nurse. What did she think the grandmother was going to do? I imagine there was a fair bit of shock involved with realizing that a patient's family had delivered the baby instead of the hospital, but still. My father, up until I was born, had not seen a newborn baby, like ever. Naturally, he assumed that all babies look like they do in movies or commercials. As you can imagine, he was quite disappointed when an alien-looking thing is handed to him and introduced to him as his daughter. He handed me back to the doctors and went outside for a smoke to calculate how much all of the plastic surgeries were going to cost. Newborn babies are kind of gross looking, sticky and covered in baby cheese. Baby cheese? Well, now I'm not finishing the rest of my sub, thanks. My own husband, during my first C-section, the doctor asks if he wants to look over the curtain at the baby being delivered. He looks over, looks back with a look of horror. "What's wrong?" "Your insides are on your outsides." I will never forget the look on his face or the sound of his voice. "They're ripping you apart," is what my husband said in that exact situation. "They're tearing you apart, Lisa." When my mum gave birth via C-section to my brothers and I, triplets, the doctor asked my dad if he was okay watching the operation. My dad's response, "Oh yeah, it just looks like you're gutting a deer." My mum watched the second C-section, my husband had watched the first, and it fully satisfied his curiosity about where babies come from. She told me later that they hauled everything out, cut out the baby, then according to her, they stuffed you like a turkey to put everything back in. When I was born, they took me off immediately to clean me, take my footprints, bundled me up, and whatnot. I guess the two nurses were in a bit of a hurry and were doing both at the same time, and I managed to get a print of my left foot twice instead of a left and a right. Apparently, upon seeing the prints, my father became extremely distressed and literally ripped the blanket off me to make sure I didn't actually have two left feet. When my older sister was being born, my dad was in the room. He was so excited to watch that he screamed, "Honey, you gotta see this!" My mum said deadpan, "I'm a bit busy, can I get back to you, dear?" Kind of on topic, my mum said that when she woke up my dad to tell him her water broke, he jumped out of bed and started sweeping. She asked what the frick he was doing and he said, "I have to clean, the baby is coming." Just imagine what he's gonna think of these floors. Get out the fine china. According to my parents, I was a super fast delivery. Like so fast that the doctors and nurses had stepped out of the room to go to attend to someone else, and my mum grabbed my dad and told him to get ready to catch me. My dad didn't even have time to put on gloves and had to catch me, baby gunk and all. Apparently he smiled, passed me to the nurses, who came rushing in, kissed my mum on the lips, then leaned over and vommed everywhere. In conclusion, baby gunk and spew. Medical professional here. We were trying to get mum to push for at least 10 seconds with each attempt at getting baby out. So I'm counting down from 10 and ask the dad to join in just as baby's head appears. 10, 9, 7, 4, 7, 3. The guy was so excited and nervous and caught in the moment that he forgot how to count. One of the most precious moments I've gotten to be a part of. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My mum wanted to deliver me naturally, but there were complications. My head was way too big. My mum was still trying to push when the doctor realized he would have to perform an emergency C-section. Apparently they put the bars up on the side of my mum's bed, rushed her out of the room at full speed and turned the lights off, leaving my dad stranded alone in a hospital room by himself. He said he didn't know what to do, so he just sat down, still in the dark, and waited for someone to get him. A little over an hour later, a nurse came in to prepare the room, found my dad and brought him down to the nursery to see me. I laughed so hard just thinking about my father sitting alone, in the dark, in a random room in a hospital while I was being born. My father's son is a very well-educated, well-spoken man. He was with me in the hospital room when I gave birth, and the first thing he said after seeing our son the first time was, "Oh my God, look at his balls. They are huge on a newborn. Now I'm curious, but I don't want to search for baby balls." "Oh, here you go, attached pictures and hyperlink, for educational purposes. Wait, NSA, Prism, frick! Well, you took one for the team there, pal." My mum went into labor late in the evening. My dad was asleep, he had to work early. She went in and said, "The baby is coming, get up." He replied, "Calm down, it's fine, go have a cold bath." So she had my grandma take her to the hospital. In my dad's defense, if he sleeps as heavily as me, he probably wasn't even awake for this. My biological father was out drinking while I was born. My mum's best friend and the man I consider my father was there the whole time and used to tell me all the time how I could fit in one of his hands. Each time he told me, he looked teary-eyed. I'm curious as to whether this was a small or premature baby, or whether the fine father figure in question was in fact an enormous giant, or whether he was rocking gloves like Uncle Jack from Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I was born on Father's Day. Haha, funny story. My dad got tennis rackets and tennis balls as a Father's Day gift, so he was playing with them in the basement, hitting balls against the wall when my mum went into labor. So she yelled at him from the top of the stairs that the baby was coming, and my dad, he says, "Okay, dear, I'll be down here playing tennis." She was livid. I was born in the 80s and my dad was in the operating room. I have a few older brothers who are all born naturally, but bro number 3 did some damage on the way out, so I was born via scheduled C-section, something my parents weren't really used to. My parents didn't know the gender of their new baby, me, ahead of time, so it was going to be a surprise. The surgeon put his hand in my mum's abdomen to reach for me and yelled to the room, "It's a girl," before getting me out. My dad was so excited he just blurted out, "How can you tell?" And the surgeon looked at him with a sarcastic face and said, "She's wearing earrings." When my dad was born, my grandpa wasn't even there. He was asleep in the lobby of the hospital. The doctor had to go and find him to tell him he was a father. When he came into the delivery room and the doctor showed him my dad, he only had one thing to say. "I thought they were supposed to be cute." My dad always said I looked like an undercooked lizard. It was a Sunday and my mum was in labor with me. The doctor comes in and asks, "How's it going?" Mum, "Oh, I'm feeling…" "Oh no, the football game. The Bears are playing and how's it going?" My dad, "Up by 7. I was delivered by C-section, but apparently my mum's contractions were so intense that while she was holding my dad's hand, she squeezed so tight that she broke it. Mind you, my dad is 6'4" with huge hands and my mum is only about 5'5". The day I was born, my dad took me down every hall in the hospital and showed me off to everyone who would look. "Look how beautiful my little girl is." My mum said he was gone with me for over an hour. "That is just the sweetest thing," put a big grin on my face. "Look at this beautiful thing that I made." "All by myself." Well, me and my wife, we get to keep it. I was in the OR assisting with a C-section. Dad was there and he passed out and crapped himself. I thought that was pretty fantastic. My dad likes to tell the story of my birth over and over. They knew I would be born early. At 6 months, the doctors realized they couldn't keep me in any longer. They warned my dad that I wouldn't cry because I was so premature. Not only did I come out mad as hell, but I screamed my little head off too. They told my dad that at 2 pounds I only had a 5% chance of survival. 1973, mind you. I proved them wrong on all counts. My dad broke his back a few days before my mum went into labor with my brother. He was still in the hospital recovering from surgery, not able to walk around yet. My mum went into labor in the same hospital, and my dad demanded for a large enough room for 2 beds and that they wheel his butt down to her room so he could be with her. So my dad was laying in a hospital bed with a broken back right next to my mum when she had my brother. Thankfully not the one that I personally saw, but when my younger cousin was born, they had someone who was still training in the room observing and whatnot. Well, after the birth, she was in charge of taking care of the placenta. It dropped out of her hands and splattered all over the floor. My uncle was so disgusted by it that he fainted. For the birth of my oldest brother, my dad was holding my mum's hand. After he was born, my mum noticed he was still rubbing his hand. She asked him why he was rubbing it, and my dad said, "Well, he was squeezing my hand pretty hard." My mum asks, "Why didn't you tell me I was hurting you?" Dad says, "Well, I figured you were probably in more pain than I was." They've been married for 31 years and they both endured 4 more childbirths. Oh, my dad started freaking out so much when I was born that he stole my mum's oxygen mask for himself. The doctor started yelling at him about how the baby, me, needed the oxygen and had to steal it away from him. An older resident once told me the story about how he was working in New York City in his youth. There was a blizzard and a guy couldn't get his wife to the hospital in time. She gave birth at home and they brought them in to check up on the baby and mother. The dude is obviously in shock from the delivery and keeps saying, "I told him," the baby, "to stay in there. I told him to stay. Not an hour old and he's already stopped listening to me." Cracks me up every time he tells it. I'm just getting a hilarious mental image of this guy screaming, "Stop! Stop!" at his wife's hoo-ha. When I was younger and mad at my parents, I told them that I hoped I was switched at birth because there was no way I could be related to them. My mum said that wasn't possible because my dad literally never let go of me when I was in the hospital. He stayed with me the whole time because he was afraid someone would try to switch their crappy baby with his awesome baby. When my brother was born, his head was like a lemon being shoved out of a birth canal. My dad looked at him, then asked the doctor if his head was going to stay like that. He also wrote my name wrong on the birth certificate. I love my dad. When my sister was born in the 80s, my dad was ill-prepared for what newborns sometimes look like when they come out. Newborn skulls are kind of squishy, so when my sister got squeezed out, her head got a little squished and came out kind of conehead-like. In the delivery room, my dad smiled and said she was beautiful. Then he immediately exited, started crying, and called his friend Mike, a doctor, and said, "I don't know, man, there's something wrong with her. She came out looking like a frickin' hammerhead shark." His buddy had to convince him nothing was wrong and the head would go back to normal. Apparently he kept saying, "But she looks like a frickin' hammerhead," over and over again. Dad here. My second child was born with bright, shiny red hair. Neither me nor her mum have red hair. There were about 10 or 15 assorted doctors, interns, nurses, etc. in the room. One of the interns sees the hair and immediately asks, "So, does red hair run in your family?" Every medical professional in the room sucks in a breath. They knew the dangers of asking such a question, probably from previous births. I looked the intern in the eye and said, "Yes, hers and mine." Everyone breathed a collective sigh of relief and immediately went back to what they were doing. Had I been quicker on my feet, I would have said something to the effect of, "No, wait, frick, I knew it!" and stormed out while everyone glared evilly at the intern. It would have taught him a lesson. My mum loves to tell the story about my older brother, parents' firstborn kid, being born. They got to the hospital around 2 a.m., and after the initial examination, the doctor said it was going to be a while still and disappeared. An hour or so later, the nurse says it's getting to be time, so she goes to find the doctor, and she can't. He's not answering pages or anything. There was a trash can at the foot of the bed, and my dad started freaking out, yelling about his first kid is going to be born straight into a trash can and what a horrible start to life that is. Another nurse calmed him down just in time for the doctor to show up yawning. He'd fallen asleep somewhere and nothing was waking him up. I worked in the local EMS system for about 6 years. In that time, I've become acquainted with a lot of the floor staff. Before my son was born, we arrived at the L&D unit and I was greeted by the staff warmly and excitedly. They made sure that both my then wife and I were treated with the best of care. Fast forward to 40 hours later. She had been in labor for 36 of them. I have not slept at all in that time frame, nor have I eaten. I was too nervous to leave her side, worried that I would miss the birth of my first child. The moment arrives, she's crowning. I'm there holding her hand and being comforting as I can when it hits me like a sack of bricks. Holy crap, you're about to have a kid. You, the irresponsible paramedic. You're about to be responsible for another human being. That played on repeat in my head. As my gorgeous son is delivered, the combination of exhaustion, stress, and hunger took me out. I remember the nurses say, "Wow, he looks really pale. Oh crap!" Then a whiteout and a thud. I waked up to the ED staff and some of my fellow EMS crews and L&D staff standing over me. To this day, I have not yet lived down that I, a 6'1", 300-pound ex-rugby player paramedic, was knocked out by a newborn who was 21 inches long, weighing 7 pounds 11 ounces. I love that story. What's the craziest advice someone has given you about your pregnancy? I was about 8 months pregnant. I said something at a family dinner one Sunday about how I was scared of labor. My gram shouts out, "You know, you should smoke a blunt." Now, my family's open about their green herb use. Most of my family will smoke from time to time, but my grandmother has never smoked in her life, so I was a bit confused. I just looked at her, and she keeps on going, "If you smoke blunts well into your labor, it will keep you calm and help the pain. I'll find you some green herb. Just smoke it in the bathroom of the hospital. But wear socks. You have ugly feet, and the doctor won't help you if he sees your cracked heels." My Grammy sure is something. I didn't take her advice, and the doctor delivered my baby even with my cracked heels. And once I had the baby and could reach my feet again, I made sure they weren't cracked anymore. Got severe itching all over my body during the 7th month. Did the routine test for liver function, all normal. Colleague advises, rub your husband's underwear which he has left for wash or laundry all over your body as a remedy for itching. No, I did not follow that advice. Oh, I was told that I need to shave down there or the baby will get carpet burn. Like, what? I feel like shaving down there would be the thing that gave the baby stubble burn. When I was pregnant, past my due date, a coworker advised me to drink cod liver oil mixed with vodka. Apparently, this mixture would upset my digestive system, give me horrible diarrhea, and thus trigger labor contractions. To clarify, I did not drink this combo to help with being overdue. I ended up several days later being medically induced, and the labor delivery was swift and baby healthy. He's a grown man now. That I should drink her crappy MLM aloe vera juice every day. It's not advisable for pregnant women. I knew when I started this story collection that it would be full to bursting with homeopathic crap, and I think we've done quite well to have this be our first story about it, to be honest. My labor should be painless because Jesus died and erased the pain during childbirth, penalty humans got from Eve. If I feel pain, it's because I don't believe in Jesus' redemptive powers. That's not how that works. That's not how any of that works. Was told not to drink hot tea because then I would boil my baby. The reasoning for this advice was that the umbilical cord acted as a sort of snorkel from the baby to the mother's navel. If the navel was submerged, the baby wouldn't be able to get air. I had a coworker tell me that eating peanut butter, I was eating an apple with peanut butter on my lunch break, would give my baby cancer. I already thought she was the world's greatest idiot, so that nugget of wisdom was just confirmation. Don't raise your arms above your head. It will tangle the baby's cord and the baby will die. I came here having been given this advice as well. Even worse, the kid was born with the cord around his neck and needed to be delivered by C-section for other reasons. I could tell she wanted to say I told you so. Both mine had their cords wrapped and I had 2 C-sections, but cords wrapped aren't really that unusual. But I'm sure she would have loved to I told you so me. She's also the woman that told me she blames her 1970s potty training techniques for her daughter's bipolar. She feels like common practice was abusive and led to all of her daughter's mental health issues. Not to sit on stairs because it will cause you to have a miscarriage. People are crazy. According to my mother, everything can cause a miscarriage. Stairs, the silent killer. Coffee? Miscarriage. Tea? Miscarriage. Too much meat? Miscarriage. Not enough meat? Miscarriage. Sewing? Miscarriage. Paddling the school canoe? Oh, you'd better believe that's a miscarriage. Had 2 miscarriages before finally having my daughter. Just bad luck chromosomal abnormalities. But she made sure to remind me not to do all those things again next time. You know, just in case. Thanks for the subtle blame, Mom. Not me, but my sister. She had to have an emergency C-section when she had my niece. Her mother-in-law said she wouldn't be a real woman unless she had a natural birth. I was 18 when I had my son and was already terrified. Had to be induced and ended up having to have a C-section because labor just wasn't progressing and his heart rate kept dropping. For the first year and a half of my son's life, my mother told me I wasn't a real mom because I had to have a C-section. My mother-in-law said it's okay to drink mixed drinks. She went on to say that my husband was a margarita baby. I now call him that when he gets on my nerves. That is hilarious. It's like, okay, margarita baby, whatever you say. My mother-in-law, don't eat spicy foods or stand under the moon. Ugh. It's the full moon, not just the moon in general. This was a decade ago and my memory sucks. The spicy thing comes from the superstition that spicy foods will give your kid a birthmark. On my very first OB visit, first baby, they handed me a book about month-by-month pregnancy and said that if I had any questions, to just refer to the book. Then I said, well, what if the baby… She cut me off right there and pointed to the book and said, it's in the book. I changed OBs. For those who are asking, my question was not in the book. I had questions about the baby being premature. My brother and I were born very premature and I was going to ask her about it. And my baby ended up being born 3.5 months early, and I had a lot of complications prior to that. Being high risk is not fun. But he's healthy now. Wow, that is complete crap. Imagine if every doctor did that. What an idiot. Walks into doctor's office. Hey doc, I've been feeling nauseous and have had severe stomach pains for some time. Did you check WebMD? What? Did you check WebMD? Nah, I figure… I can't help people who won't help themselves. Well, seems that in some rare cases, the medical experts can be just as infuriating as the people around us, I guess. But still, folks, 99 times out of 100, listen to the people who've trained in this rather than your crazy homeopathic hippie uncle. "Don't worry about the swelling and high blood pressure, that's normal," says my midwife days before being induced due to preeclampsia. Literally a life-threatening condition in some cases. A+ midwifery. Oh, I've got this. The lady at the counter in the village bakery told me that I should smear my face with my man's splooge to counter pregnancy acne. It was the first time I'd ever met her. In high school, I read an article that said, in complete seriousness, women should give their men BJs every morning because morning sickness is caused by the body not being used to splooge. Younger me earnestly asked our medical teacher that question. Her tiny Christian body just froze. Looking back, it was a horrible idea and I can't believe I asked that. My entire family was super judgmental against breastfeeding for some reason. It was really strange. "How long are you gonna do that for?" "You're taking the joy of feeding the baby away from everyone," said my mother when I was breastfeeding. She came around though and ended up getting judgy about women who choose to formula feed. I'm not judgy, by the way. My mother-in-law said the same thing. She said I was preventing her son, my husband, from being a dad because I breastfed. Apparently the zillion other things he did as a parent besides feed her didn't make him a dad. What a nut. I'm in my 30s. When we had our kids, my mum kept telling me how when I was a baby, I was fed exclusively on formula because she was told by her doctors it was the best. She kept saying it, almost, but not quite, judging us for breastfeeding our own children. I honestly hear that from a lot of people our age. I'm just shy of 33. I wonder if there was a formula marketing shift in that time period. It's actually a real problem. 2 generations of women were convinced through false advertising that formula was safer and healthier. This led to a loss of cultural knowledge on breastfeeding. My in-laws were fully supportive of my breastfeeding until my baby reached 6 months old. Then it went from, "You're doing the best thing for him," to, "When are you weaning?" It doesn't expire, jeez. Ooh, I get to vent. My 4-month-old has a cold and last week he was really fussy and wouldn't take a bottle at daycare. Until then, he'd been going back and forth between breast and bottle just fine. The daycare provider asked if I was still breastfeeding and if so, could I stop so he'd take a bottle better? No. He's back to normal now. I didn't fight to breastfeed through mastitis and a gigantic mother-fricking abscess just to quit at her convenience. Bottles are fine, but we like breastfeeding too. My grandmother made a comment about my weight gain with my first pregnancy around month 5. For reference, I started severely underweight at 87 pounds and was closely monitored by my doctor because of it. At this point, I was nearing 125. When I told her that the obstetrician-gynecologist was happy with where I was, she told me of her own doctor's advice in 1956. "Smoke a packet of cigarettes per day to keep your weight down. The baby can gain its own weight after birth." Thanks but no thanks, Grandma. One person told me I would never be able to fit a baby out of my body because I wasn't big enough down there, and to just get a C-section. Not a doctor. A random person who had literally never seen down there. No, I'm not going to get major surgery just because you don't think I'm large enough. I've had 2 successful natural births. My mom's a petite woman and she naturally gave birth to my brother who was really close to 10 pounds. They became quite the attraction in the hospital as people saw the monster baby, checked the room number, then saw my mom and wondered how the heck he got out of her. Pretty sure my mother-in-law had the same thing happen. My husband was a 10-pound baby with the widest shoulders on record at his hospital. That butthole neglected to tell me this until we were married. I have the sudden urge to shake my snoring boyfriend awake and demand every single one of his birth stats, shoulder width included. Are you me? This is literally the story of me. My mom barely comes up to my shoulder. I was 10 pounds 6 ounces and nurses stopped by for like 36 hours to see the tiny woman who gave birth to the Thanksgiving turkey. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. While pregnant with me, my mum was told that drinking beer would help her baby develop and be nice and chubby. I was 5 weeks early and barely 6 pounds. It could have been substantially worse. Apart from being a really small baby, I didn't have any fetal alcohol-related health conditions. Conversely, when my grandma was pregnant with my mum, her first, in the 50s, the accepted wisdom was that smoking while pregnant was a good idea for first-time mothers, because it lowered their birth rate, which was supposed to make labor and delivery easier. But low birth weight is extremely dangerous and makes the process harder. My mum was born 2 months early and weighed about 2 or 3 pounds. She was so tiny that my grandma dressed her in baby doll clothing and my mum spent her first month of life in the hospital's NICU. That's insane. I wonder what medical knowledge that's commonly accepted today will turn out in the future to have been disastrously wrong. That if you try really hard and stretch a lot, you too can have a natural birth. Not actually a bad plan, as long as you don't wind up not fricking dilating after 30 hours and have an emergency C-section due to fetal distress. Because I just didn't try hard and stretch enough. Taking a bath can cause a miscarriage. To be fair, it was from my husband's incredibly sweet grandmother who meant well. She was 92 years old at the time and hadn't been pregnant in a very, very long time. She also had a good number of miscarriages. My father-in-law and his sister are 15 years apart in age, so I think she was coming from a different place than most. One of my work colleagues was obsessed with recommending that I eat citrus fruits, especially the easy-to-peel cutie tangerines. She was convinced that it would give the baby a higher IQ in the long run. So not really about pregnancy advice, but someone told me to put baking soda in a cup and pee on it first thing in the morning. If it fizzed, I was pregnant with a boy. If it did not fizz, I was having a girl. If it didn't involve literal baking soda, this sounds like some of the kind of medieval tests people would conduct on themselves way back when. Like peeing on a potted seedling and its growth determining whether you're fertile or not. Silly idiots. When I found out I was pregnant a fourth time, 3 losses in a row, I heard so many from strangers. Mine isn't necessarily advice, but more open mouth insert foot. Are you sure this one's gonna work? I was also told that if I was on my cell phone or around my modem or router, it would cause brain damage to my unborn child. She's 4, perfectly healthy, no brain damage, and let's just say it took a lot of medical attention to get her to full term. What caused my miscarriages? They said my hormones couldn't sustain a pregnancy, and after the 3rd, I was told that with my hormone levels, getting pregnant again wouldn't happen. She was a surprise and the best one ever. It took an educated doctor that wanted the best outcome. Previous doctors just looked at my history and was like, sorry for your loss, maybe next time will go better. The best day of my husband and mine's life was finding out that she was alive, thriving, and having an amazing doctor who moved heaven and earth to make sure she'd make it. He was at work when I found out, and he actually yelled and his entire office heard him. He almost ran out of the office, he was more excited than me. Sitting with my legs crossed will cause a miscarriage. Don't take a bath, it'll cause a miscarriage. Lifting more than 5 pounds will cause a miscarriage. Wearing tight-fitted clothes? You guessed it, miscarriage. Spicy food could cause a miscarriage. I worked retail. A stranger informed me that morning sickness and smell sensitivity isn't real while I was heading to the bathroom to throw up. Also had a customer tell me that the baby isn't actually affecting my bladder. Had a 3rd customer tell me not to drink tap water. Can't remember why, probably causes miscarriages. My cousin tried to tell me that I had morning sickness because it's God's way of telling a woman she isn't ready for a baby. Had an anterior placenta, so we couldn't feel kicks until close to 30 weeks. My mum said there was no such thing and the reason we couldn't feel kicks is because I was fat. In conclusion, literally everything causes miscarriages and morning sickness is a lie. When I found out I was pregnant, a nurse friend of mine felt the need to rattle off an endless list of crap that could potentially be wrong with my baby. Another friend of mine, when I started telling people that I was pregnant after the 3 months and was accused of telling people too early, said, "It doesn't matter when you tell people, you could have a miscarriage at any point during your pregnancy." They both meant well, but really guys, just shut up. My grandma constantly told me not to argue with my husband because it would cause the baby to be fussy and difficult. Frozen cabbage leaves in the bra to help with swelling and pain due to breastfeeding. While it did feel awesome for the whole minute or so that they stayed frozen, they eventually turned to mush and made a mess. Advice I wish someone had given me: get a mattress protector, not just for when your water breaks. Carrying a big baby next to your bladder means the act of rolling over in a bed can cause leakage. And if you're too tired after the birth to take the baby to a changing table or the floor, you're going to want a layer of protection on your mattress. Soon as that diaper is off, the baby will projectile poop. Sheets and walls can be washed, but mattresses can't. Poop explosions are real. Prepare yourselves. Now I want to add a really good mattress cover or pad to my registry. And make sure you register for 2. When the baby pees all over the bed at 1 a.m. or your milk leaks everywhere in the middle of your night, you need a backup mattress protector for when the first one is getting washed. My mum was talking to my paternal grandma while pregnant with me, then winced because I was kicking her ribs. My grandma told her to swat it so it'll know. She wanted my mum to spank fetus me through her own belly for kicking her. After my mum told us that story, "Swat it so it'll know," became a common response anytime someone was complaining about something. Well, I'm the husband and father, but a doctor told my 38 or 39-week pregnant wife that her condition was no excuse to not keep me satisfied in the bedroom. Not even sure why it was brought up. She was just getting a regular checkup. I wasn't even there. The doc busts out with this. Not her regular doctor. Her regular doctor was also off pregnant. She was not impressed, to say the least. So there's the advice. Being pregnant is no reason to not please your significant other. Did you pass along that helpful advice to her regular doctor? I'm sure she would have been delighted to hear that a colleague was dispensing pearls of wisdom like that. She did, actually, along with a letter to the head of medicine due to another incident. This was a new doctor and actually still on probation now. With my first baby, I had a random lady in a grocery store tell me to take a bath in bleach because it's good for the skin and for the baby's growth and development. I was mortified. I was told that heartburn during pregnancy meant that the child had a lot of head hair, had a crapload of heartburn, and kid had barely any hair. "Oh, don't go swimming or the baby will drown," 25-year-old co-worker. All I could picture is the little nugget with a straw out of my hoo-ha to breathe. My friend's dad was a chiropractor. She told him that I'd had miscarriages. He told me, "No wonder, you'll lose every pregnancy with a pelvis like that." Freaked me out so much, and I guess I ruined the party by crying and leaving, and my friend was mad at me. I have back trouble, yes, but I have 3 children living. My adorable father-in-law told me I had to deliver naturally. If I had C-section, I wouldn't love my baby as much because I didn't suffer for him. First of all, the kid was comfortably sitting and was not turning around, you utter butthole. I was not about to risk my kid's life in a feet-first delivery, no sir. Second, a C-section is a major surgery and a pain in the butt, believe me, I did suffer. You try being cut open like that while awake and then deal with a feisty, colicky newborn while recovering from it. Third, really? I need to feel pain in order to love my child? I can't even. Fourth, you don't even have a uterus, old man. Zip it. Ah, that felt good. Not allowed to sew either using sewing machine or by hand. It will cause the umbilical cord to tangle. Just because you almost died carrying that one, don't let it stop you from having another one because all pregnancies are different. Okay then, I could potentially have 2 motherless children. Sounds like something a responsible adult should do. I had extremely high blood pressure and the placenta dropped so low the doctor said just bending over would cause a problem. They couldn't see the bottom on ultrasound and had to use the wand. I had such bad morning sickness, and then when that was done, I had acid reflux so bad I was throwing up 3 to 10 times a day. I didn't gain any weight my whole pregnancy and couldn't eat. Doctor said just the elevation in blood pressure alone was reason enough to never do it again. Currently pregnant and currently dealing with my mother who became an anti-vaxxer 13 years ago. Just found out recently when I mentioned I got my Tdap and flu shot and I asked if everyone in the family was caught up because the baby is due next month and the flu season is right around the corner. She called me a freaking idiot for putting rotting DNA in my body while pregnant. She refuses to get a flu shot, so I refuse to let her see her first grandchild. Not taking chances with my kid's life because you can't be bothered to do legitimate research or listen to me when I try and explain it to you. Identical twins. What's the craziest way which you've abused your powers of mistaken identity? I had a friend who had an identical twin, and they both spent the first month of university, they went to the same school, convincing everybody that there was actually 3 of them and that they were triplets. By the time they decided to come clean, nobody would believe that there wasn't a third of them around somewhere. You can't trick me, I've hung out with Lucas countless times, etc. My dad is an identical twin. When he was dating my mum in college, he used to play a game with his twin. He'd call my mum and partway through the conversation, hand the phone off to my uncle. My uncle would see how long he could carry the conversation before he had to tap out and hand the phone off to my dad. Anyways, the first time my mum ever said, "I love you," to my dad, she was actually talking to my uncle. My uncle faltered, and that was when my mum realized what had been happening. They must have straightened everything out because they ended up married and had me. But seriously, what a colossal strategic error on my dad's part. My brother and I had a sequence of 10 numbers memorized, so if anyone ever asked if we were telepathic, we could prove that we were. This was like 3rd grade. I know 2 sets of twins that have created their own language. One of them taught them to their kids who are now step-siblings. I walked in one day and they were speaking what sounded like an alien language. They stopped for a second and stared at me because it had been a secret. My stepbrother ended up telling me, but I was amazed because it was a full conversation like it was completely normal. I just couldn't understand a word. My twin brother got me a detention for his dress code violation and neglected to tell me, which resulted in me almost getting suspended. In return, I failed his French test. My twin and I tried switching places for a day in grade school. It lasted all of 5 minutes because even though our teachers didn't catch on, her classmates knew and kept asking what I was doing in their class and where my sister was. My sister and I did the exact same thing. In first grade, the teacher had the class split up into different groups with my sister and I in different groups. After a little while, our teacher moved the groups so that I was moved from the craft table to the reading section, and my sister the opposite. I forget what happened, but our teacher had to leave the room for some reason, and I was able to convince my sister to switch places with me because I was a small child and wanted to do anything but read. When she came back into the room, she immediately noticed something was off and went to go get our mother, who was right across the hall with her kindergarten class. She immediately pointed out who was who, and we were sent off to the principal's office. This is the only story I have about us switching places because my sister respects authority and never wants to use being an identical twin to our advantage. That feels like a whole bunch of potential gone to waste. What's the point in having a superpower like an identical twin if you can't use it to mess with people? Here's a following couple of answers from people who weren't twins, but didn't let that stop them from abusing that power. I've run into people, not close friends, just acquaintances, I haven't wanted to talk to and have pretended to be my identical twin to avoid annoying small talk. Oh, I'm sorry, you must think I'm my name. We're twins, this happens a lot. I'm not a twin, but had my whole class of 4th graders convinced that I was, and that my twin was also a teacher, and we would switch places and teach the other's class occasionally. It was hilarious hearing kids' theories on how to decide when I was me and when I was my twin. I went to kindergarten all the way through to the 12th grade with fraternal brother-sister twins. During the last who gives a frick anymore weeks of senior year, they switched places for a day and just refused to admit that they weren't each other. While in Iraq, I signed all of my legal rights over to my brother. That gave him legal rights to my bank account. When my family was in financial trouble, I gave the okay for my brother to take money out of my account. The bank refused to honor the legal documents and would not let my brother take money out. Next day, he went to the same bank with my passport and took the money out of my account anyway. My brother went to a job interview pretending to be me. He, got the job and I've been working there for just over a year now. My father's father had an identical twin and they were both in the Air Force. First trick was that my grandfather was blind in one eye due to a childhood accident while running with scissors. His brother went and took his physicals for him, but they caught them just before pilot training. Fast forward, they're both active duty during World War II, and one is stationed in California while the other is stationed somewhere at a US base in the Pacific. My grandfather, Earl, was the guy who would put pilots in their cockpit and make sure it was sealed correctly before they took off. Mind you, these pilots are flying the fastest aircraft manufactured at the time, and nevertheless, my grandfather tells them right before they leave, "I'll see you when you get there," with a wink. His brother, with the same last name, imagine Private Swenson or whatever, was the guy who would undo the cockpits for the pilots after they landed in the Pacific, and he would say to them, "Hey, you made it! I got here pretty fast, huh?" Producing the most astonished look of bewilderment and amazement one could muster. They ran this joke for quite some time and even got written up in the newspaper about it later on. I thought it was such a great old joke. Hope you guys liked it. My identical twin died. There are some people who knew him but did not know he was a twin. When I bump into them accidentally, they always freak out. I have identical twin brothers. As children, they constantly called each other ugly, which they did not get but made my mother laugh every time. They still do it today, mostly as a dumb old joke. One of my nicknames for my twin is ugly. Some of the others are Lefty and Spare Parts. When I was younger, me and my non-twin sister convinced our younger sisters, who are twins, that everyone in the world is born a twin, so you've got spare parts if you have an accident. We made up stories about our own twins and how much we missed them, but how they'll always live on as our lung or whatever. Then we asked them which one of them was the spare. Twins fighting is brilliant. They're so evenly matched. One of my high school teachers said she had her twin take and pass her driver's test for her. No one was ever the wiser. My dad is a twin, and every so often one would break up with the other one's girlfriend. Oh man. How could you say those things? How could you be so cold? I don't know, it's like I hardly even know you. Bye. I imagine however it actually transpired, it left the girlfriends pretty confused in some way or another. I went to a convention with two friends who were identical twins. They dressed the same one day, hoping to throw people off and have some laughs, which worked perfectly, at least until they got separated. Then they both ended up going around in circles using the "have you seen someone who looks exactly like me" line to try and find each other. My dad has an identical twin brother. This is his famous story. My family is Iranian, and it's mandatory for young men to serve in the army for a minimum of 2 years. They do have a few exceptions. For example, if your eyes are weak or if you can't see without glasses, then you don't have to serve. My dad had the weaker eyes between the two of them, so he failed his own exam. He took his brother's ID to the army officers and failed the exam again to get his brother out of that responsibility. I'm reminded of a story I saw here on Reddit about a really old man who was with his wife for like 50 years, eventually ends up passing away, and without ever having told anyone he had an identical twin. So his brother shows up to the funeral and chaos ensues. That would be an awesome story, like if the other old man's life is in shambles at the time, so he shows up and then decides to keep playing his brother, who's extremely successful and loved all over town. He fakes everything by acting hella confused about the funeral. I don't know, just a thought. 1. Took the SAT for my brother. 2. My brother had me go on a date with a girl he met online when he was away. How did the date go? Did he end up continuing to see her? Did she ever found out? I have so many questions, you need to explain. 2 weeks later, when he came back from the trip, he went on a date with her, and she didn't detect it. Later, when we told her, she couldn't believe it. We were all so entertained by this for a long time. There are some questions that the poster of the story never answers satisfactorily. How did the date go? Did she stay together with the original brother? Or the second one? Think of us nosy weirdos reading your stories when you post them. Dated a girl a couple of years ago that had an identical twin. They said they'd switch class schedules for a day and stuff like that for fun. I was able to tell them apart due to the way that they presented themselves. Everyone has slightly different facial expressions and stuff like that. For fun, my girlfriend would leave the room I was in and her twin would sometimes come in and pretend to be her. Rarely worked. Fun game though, and no, I didn't have a three-way with them, so don't ask. Man, if you noticed that you were talking to the sister, you should have played it off like you didn't know. Then when your girlfriend came back in, said stuff like, "Oh man, you've never kissed me so passionately before, that was amazing." My sister and I were handed each other's picture forms on our senior year picture day in high school. We thought it might be funny to not switch them back, take each other's yearbook, school ID card pictures, and have a few people know we did it. Harmless shenanigans, right? Then one day at the end of the year, after SATs, AP tests, and college applications were all over, I got called into the principal's office. This had never happened to me before, and I had no idea why on earth I'd be called down, since I hadn't gotten into any trouble. I get there, and my sister has already arrived, and I'm just like, oh crap. Principal sits us down and tells us that, when cross-referencing our school ID photos and the driver's licenses we provided at the SAT, College Board found a discrepancy and was investigating the possibility that we might have taken each other's tests. I hadn't even thought about that being a possibility, and all the blood went to my stomach. My sister and I freaked out, and as calmly as we could tried to explain what we thought was a harmless prank. But he kept a straight face and insisted that if there was any possibility that we switched tests, our scores would be invalidated. After about 10 minutes of explaining and reasoning with him about how we'd comply with any investigation, but we swear we took our own tests and so on, he calmly told us it was all a joke. I felt like I was going to pass out. He was laughing his butt off and saying things like, "Got you good," and reassuring us that everything was fine and that we should go back to class. Turns out that since we have family in the school district, the principal had heard that my sister and I switched and decided it would be brilliant to make us think our futures were in danger. In his defense, it was an objectively fantastic prank, and his delivery was so level and authoritative, it at no point occurred to us that College Board doesn't reference yearbook photos to confirm identities. Props to him for creativity, but what goes around comes around. In conclusion, sister and I switched places on a yearbook day. Our principal pranked us hard months later by making us think our life careers were in danger. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Not a twin, but Asian. Back in middle school, my friend and I took each other's classes for an entire day, and no one noticed. I think the best one I ever heard was twins who worked super ultra overtime at the same job by simply pretending to be the same person and trading off shifts, putting in a 120 hours a week or so. A teacher of mine who's a triplet told us that once she took an exam for her sister that she already took and studied for, got an A- for herself and an A for her sister, and the third triplet got a D because the other two excluded her from the scheme. Honestly, being an identical twin is not so much about cool pranks as it is responding to people who ask, "Why are you so nice to them in chem class and then totally ignore me when I try to talk to you in English?" Or this, most common problem, guy, "Hey, what's up? Love the new hair." Me internally, "Do I know this guy? I didn't do anything special to my hair. Who are you? I can't remember who anyone is." Then out loud, "Hello." Guy, "How brutal was that test the other day, right?" Me internally again, "Maybe he's in my psych class? Wait, did we even have a test? Maybe just go along with it." "Oh, I am totally screwed for next week." Guy, "Next week? The final's not until the end of the quarter." Finally, "Oh no, he thinks I'm my twin. Should I say something? That'd be awkward. I'll look like an idiot for just pretending to know him. He might get embarrassed. Maybe I can just wing it and no one will have to know that I'm me." At this point in the conversation, I decide if I should continue to be my twin or reveal myself. This is definitely my fault, in part, because I'm so bad at remembering faces. People in my classes, people at bars, people from past classes. I'll meet people on a smoke break and find out that, to my surprise, they've been sitting the next table over from me for a few weeks. Add twinliness into the mix and it's so awkward. Imagine the "is he waving at me" feeling all the time. I get that, plus a conversation. If they ask for help or make it obvious that they just want to chat, I tell them I'm the twin. My brother and I went to different colleges and didn't generally reveal to the friends we made that we each had a twin. One day, a group of people approached me in the street, calling me by my brother's name and asking me if I'd like to join them in the pub. I knew that my twin brother was already at the pub, so I said I'd bet them free drinks if I beat them to the pub in a foot race, even if I gave them a head start. They agreed and ran off at top speed while I stood there casually checking my watch and buffing my fingernails on my lapel, only for them to arrive exhausted and find me standing at the bar, drink already in hand. It's doubly impressive that he managed to change clothes on the way to the pub. I have a twin sister. I'm a guy. My little brother was born 2 years later on the same day. However, now that we're older, we look practically identical, close enough to fool his kids at least. When we do stuff together, we often get asked if we're twins. I answer yes, he answers no. This will need some backstory. My wife is a twin. Her sister and her both work at the same camp. My wife worked at the camp during the school year, while my sister-in-law worked during the summer when there was a lot more staff. Basically, they were trading places all the time, but staff of the camp would change during those times as well. Summer staff versus non-summer staff. So it was never really an issue. My wife worked mostly in the kitchen, while her sister worked as a counselor. Generally, the two were never seen together when they were both working there. It should also be said that my sister-in-law was often mistaken for a few other people around camp anyway, which only helped the situation in the end. At the end of the week, the groups of campers would do skits. One group of campers decided their skit would be about a machine that would multiply things. So my sister-in-law decided to help them out. The skit came down to the campers saying that my sister-in-law was such a hard worker that she needed a clone to help out around camp. At this point, the campers in this particular group knew about her twin, but most of the other campers did not. They turned on the machine and put my sister-in-law in. Out came her and a boy that had the same hair color and style, but that wasn't quite right. They got rid of the boy and put her back in. Out came a girl with a different hair color, but at least it was a girl this time. Next, the machine spit out a girl with the right hair color but not quite the same build. The fourth time, the machine spits out my wife. Being a nearly identical twin, this basically blew the audience away. In conclusion, my wife and sister-in-law freaked out some kids and even some adults with their shenanigans. What you guys don't understand, and maybe some other twins can back me up here, is that it's not so much tricking the teacher when switching classes as it is keeping all the other students quiet about it, since they can usually tell right away. At least for me and my brother anyways. My sister and I have picked on my partner quite a bit. We've tricked him in mostly harmless ways, but it's fun to watch his reaction. Other than that, we've always had the same schedules at school, so we haven't really taken advantage of our twin powers. I'm curious to see other responses. I dated an identical twin in high school and I was always terrified that they would frick with me. The only way that I could tell them apart was because my boyfriend had a dot on his forehead. But what if they'd drawn one on the other twin and had him pick me up just to mess with me? Ah, the anxiety. Note to self, never date twins. Or perhaps I'll end up meeting someone that has a twin without telling me in any case. And then the charade will go on even longer. Oh God, this is terrifying. I worked in a locked psychiatric ward while my twin brother works in a local emergency room. According to him, he has had at least 2 scary as frick psych patients come up to him saying, "Hey John, you crazy frick, how are ya?" And then ensues a long, scary conversation that he is not me in. I knew a pair of identical twins in high school who fricked with people all the time. I quickly learned how to tell the difference out of self-defense, and they always gave me grief for ruining their fun. We'll call them Steve and Dave. Anyway, here's the story they told me. At their high school, they were both starters for the football team. One was a running back and the other the fullback. For 4 years, Dave blocked for Steve, as Steve got the yards, the touchdowns, and the records. In the final game of their senior year, they switched jerseys without telling their coach, and for one game, Steve blocked for Dave. Dave set the school single-game rushing record under Steve's name. Because they were blabbermouths, the story got out and the coach was teed off at them for lying and for making him look like he'd put the wrong brother at the running back the whole time. I had a good friend growing up whose dad was a twin. A group of us girls went to the movies one night. Twin's dad's daughter goes to the bathroom while we wait for her in the lobby. Wouldn't you know it, not even 5 seconds later, we see her dad in the distance, holding hands with another woman. We start freaking out, thinking we've caught her dad cheating. Friend comes out and we explain the situation, ready for battle. She laughs and says, "Oh, that's my aunt and uncle." Then she goes up to them and gives them a hug. My twin sister and I aren't really able to fully utilize our ability due to not living with each other for most of our lives, but we do like to have fun with it. If we visit each other's town with a new group of friends, we'll switch places with one another and always make the newcomer look like they're amazing at figuring out random tips and tricks of the city. On a more serious note, my sister and I switched places about 8 months ago in order to save her from a terrible boyfriend. My sister is too sweet to her to fly, but she really needed to dump this guy, so we switched places. I met up with the jerk at the bar and told him very honestly that him and I, my sister, couldn't be together due to his abusive nature. Not identical, but fraternal, still both girls, which makes more alike than not alike. We would usually say things at the same time, but that was a coincidence. When we realized this, we started doing it on purpose to creep people out, and it really creeped them out. One specially that I remember was in 8th grade. A dude always told my sister she confused her with me, so we knew that if he saw us together, he would say something along the lines of, "You're totally identical." So the time comes and he says that, so we go and say at the same time, "What are you talking about? We're totally different." The look on his face was priceless. I wish I could have recorded it. This doesn't really go with abusing my powers of identity so much as going out of my way to not be mistaken as my twin sister. She dated some D-bag in high school who literally could not tell us apart at all. He began pursuing her, but since he was an idiot, he didn't even really take the time to get to know the difference between us two. He would mistakenly hug me, or be flirty, or check me out, or call my sister's name, all while my twin was standing 1 foot away. It became too awkward for me to the point where I just completely ignored his presence and didn't make eye contact when he was around, so he'd finally stop mixing us up. Sometimes that didn't work, so I would immediately sarcastically insult him and throw in a couple of dudes and bros to solidify the fact that I was the non-romantic twin. Even then, this moron couldn't read the flashing signs, so I just started to turn around and walk away whenever he approached. He eventually picked up that his twin was the one who wasn't a complete B-word to him. What products do cashiers silently judge people for buying? Had a teenage girl come in with several members of her family. They all came up to the counter practically in tears and bought a pregnancy test. She then went into our bathroom to take the test, which I thought was odd, seemed like the kind of thing you'd do in the sanctity of your own home. Then the girl comes out bawling, and then her family starts bawling, and they're making a huge scene in the middle of my store. It was super duper awkward. When guys buy feminine hygiene products and have to explain that it's for his girlfriend. Dude, nobody thinks you were buying tampons for yourself. Yep, I wouldn't do it when I was younger, but when I hit my mid-20s, I realized how freaking dumb I was being. Need some enemas and tampons and nail polish? I'll pick that crap up from the store for you. Just expect me to get the wrong brands, or the right brand with the wrong product. But I'll try to get it right. Once you realize you'll probably never talk to or meet 99% of the people you ever see again, it makes doing stuff like this a lot easier. I work in a bookstore. I've had people red with shame while they bought 50 Shades of Grey and make comments about how I must think they're idiots. Look, I don't give a crap about what you buy. At least you're reading and keeping my store open. Do you also get the weakly old men who proudly slap down their adult magazine on the counter? I used to work for Borders, and those were always the nicest old men. No creepers. Every time I buy lube, I always get this feeling that the cashier thinks I'm buying it for butt stuff. Same feeling whenever I buy double-ended, penetrative adult toys. One of our customers buys anywhere from 25 to 32 bottles of laxatives a week. Every week, and not the oral kind either. Maybe he cares for a giant family of surprisingly healthy smack addicts. Despite the fact that it contains mention of a crippling substance addiction, the last suggestion was strangely wholesome, don't you think? I don't judge, but I get some good stories. I saw a guy in the contraception aisle looking absolutely baffled at the wide variety of jimmies. I'm a pharmacist and went to help. With an inward sigh, some people have no idea how to use them. He said, "I have no idea what I'm looking at. There are so many. I've been fixed for almost 20 years. But my boy's going to college and I don't want him bringing STDs or any babies home with him." He got really excited when I told him about spermicide and bought 5 to 6 dozen-count boxes. That's a good dad. Okay, quick story. I have an ultra-conservative Asian mom who never even mentioned doing the deed, ever. When I got out of boot camp to my first duty station, everyone was getting care packages from home, cookies, civilian clothes, etc. I got one from my mom. It was about 100 jimmies. Assorted boxes with a note saying, "Please be safe and we will never talk about this package again. Love, Mom." Bracelets that harness the healing energy of magnets. Yeah, well, joke's on you. Blood has iron and is magnetic, and I have the power of science and the Lord. Freshman year of high school, I was a cashier at a local grocery store. There was an upscale organic cupcake boutique in town that sold their cupcakes for about $4 each. It was ridiculous, but people still bought them. Anyway, the owner would come in every other week and buy about 20 boxes of Betty Crocker cupcake mix and frosting. She must have had like a 2,000% rate of return on those things. The cupcake boutique has since gone out of business, and the lady was an annoying soccer mum in her mid-30s, so who cares? I cashiered at Home Depot. Had a dude in his mid-20s pull up to my register with rope, duct tape, cleaning gloves, tarp, bleach, Febreze, cookies, bucket, and sponges. I rung him up. I didn't even know what he'd purchased until he came back in and just said, "Dude, I could be planning a murder and you didn't even care. What the frick? I just lost $20. Then he went to return everything except the cookies. True story. And yes, Home Depot sells cookies. They're like right next to all the chips and sodas. They're those 98-cent grandma cookies that come in packs of 2. Them things are just straight fire. Real murderers use self-checkout. Sir, I make minimum wage. They do not pay me enough to care about what you're doing with that rope and tarp. I got judged by a cashier once. I was working in a welding and fabrication facility at the time as a repair guy. Since I wasn't one of the welders, I would often get tasked with whatever needed doing. The particular job at the time required ultrasonic testing of bends made in some tubing to ensure proper wall thickness. We had one tube of ultrasound gel. Sure enough, the tube got knocked off the table and run over by a forklift. The job was very time critical and we needed to do the ultrasounds now. A good substitute for ultrasonic gel is KY. I grabbed a fistful of petty cash and rushed over to a nearby grocery store and grabbed every tube of KY they had. I then ran up to the cashier, who then rung up tube after tube after tube. I was in such a rush that I really hadn't thought about the normal use of KY. As she was looking at me oddly and silently ringing up my purchase, I said something like, "It has been crazy at work today." The look on her face was priceless. Halfway out of the parking lot, I realized what had happened. We all had a good laugh about it at work, and I had the nickname KY for a few days. When parents with very overweight kids buy nothing but junk food. Do you judge people who are high and buy junk food? I worry sometimes. Also, can you tell I'm high when I do it? Usually, after you leave, my coworkers and I will comment about how stoned the last guy was. We'll laugh briefly and get on with our lives. We don't judge you, we mostly envy you. People being on Mary J were the easiest customers I had to deal with on the night shift. Drunks were the worst. I think we banned the wrong recreational substance. This isn't exactly the same thing, but I used to work at AutoZone. One day a customer came in and asked if there were any deals on our strongest antifreeze. I asked him if he meant the lowest temperature rating and he said no, the one with the most ethylene glycol. I was really confused and asked him what he needed it for, and he told me it was because his neighbor's kid just got kittens and they were trespassing on his property. I excused myself and went back to my boss, the store manager, and told him, and he told me I had to make the sale. I had to sell him 4 gallons of antifreeze to kill some defenseless kittens and absolutely crush his neighbor's kids. I never tried to say I hate anybody and I never wish anybody harm, but yeah, him. Not a cashier, but I worked in fulfillment for Amazon for 4 years. I can't tell you how many times I've checked out the name on the label for a shipment of questionable combinations. Memorable shipments include lube and an adult toy, plus a baby Einstein video, 16 bottles of laxatives and adult diapers. Anytime someone orders Thai Rent Girls 101, what you must know about doing the deed and paying for it before coming to Thailand. In conclusion, don't ever think that buying something online means that you escape the judgment of others. I've often thought about that. I shop for several family members via my Prime account. I like getting add-on items when I can do, and do not like having items coming in all week at random, so I try to group my purchases. I've ordered combinations such as cinnamon sticks, multi-pack jimmies, mouthwash, birthday candles, tarps, and hemorrhoid ointment. Now I know someone is looking at these orders and thinking, what the frick? I mean, at least you're escaping the withering face-to-face judgment. Surely that counts for something. A Vietnamese lady came in a day after Valentine's Day to buy candy. She bought hundreds of bags. I made a joke about how the dentist bill must be insane, and she told me how she sends the candy to orphan homes in Vietnam because they don't have candy there, apparently. Ugh, don't judge a book by its cover, guys. Picture it. October 31st, 1974. My mum sends 11-year-old me to the store for a bag of apples, and my dad needs Gillette razor blades. The cashier looks at me like I just took a dump on her conveyor belt. Not a cashier, but I do have a story. I got rectal cancer at age 28. I had my rectum removed. During recovery, I became completely incontinent, so I had to start wearing Depends, a kind of diaper. Just for clarity, I'm a tall, skinny, relatively well-dressed young woman. The teenage boy checking me out at Walmart let out a quiet, "damn," when he bagged them. "Dude, I just assume your grandma sent you to the store. I've bought them a few times and it was always for my grandma and I've never thought twice about it." The only time I really judged someone was when he came in and found a perfume he liked and bought 2. I said it would probably be a good idea if you have 2 women in your life, thinking wife, mother, daughter, etc., to get them something different. He said, "Oh no, one's my wife, the other's for my girlfriend. If they wear the same perfume, I don't have to worry about my wife smelling my girlfriend's perfume on me." I mean, that's smart, but it's also so crappy. Once went into a Victoria's Secret to buy a Valentine's gift for my girlfriend. The cashier asked me, "Would you like to join the Bra of the Month Club?" I asked her what that was and she said, not knowing if I was married or not, "You get 1 bra shipped to you every month which you can give to your wife or girlfriend?" I said, "Can I get 1 for each of them?" And she looked at me kind of horrified until I started laughing. The only people I silently judge are the ones trying to make up a reason for me to not silently judge them. So what if you eat that whole cake by yourself? Live a little! A cashier once talked crap to my grandma when she bought pig's feet. I think they're gross too, but I don't want you talking crap to my grandma about how gross they are. Mind your business. When my friend would buy Depends, you could tell the cashier and everyone in line would judge him hard. He was a 23-year-old college kid who still peed the bed when he drank. He tried his best, man. No, he didn't wear them to parties, he tried to remember to put them on when he drunkenly got home. This led to him putting them on backwards multiple times. This effectively kept the pee out of his diaper and in his bed. Once he forgot to put them on and brought a girl home. Let's just say he convinced her that he drunkenly showered in the middle of the night. Her ride home must have been mortified. He's not my friend anymore, by the way. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I'm a clerk at a convenience store, not something I judge harshly for, but something I've noticed and I think is funny: teenagers buying protection. Most adults buying contraception just come in, grab the jimmies, pay for them, and leave. Most people are doing the deed, and adults realize that no one cares. Teenagers buying jimmies are super awkward about it though. Typical scenario, a couple comes in and they look like they're about 15 or 16. The girl hangs out by the front door, looking around awkwardly or just staring at her phone. The boy will walk up and down the candy aisle, candy on one side, health and beauty stuff on the opposite side, pretending to look at the candy, but keeping looking at the condoms to try and see what the selection is without looking like he's looking at jimmies. Bonus awkwardness if he texts his girlfriend to ask her opinion while she's standing right in front of me waiting. He'll then grab the absolute cheapest piece of candy he can find, and a box of Trojan fire and ice, every time. The way the kid wants it to look is, I dragged my girlfriend down because I absolutely needed a single lemon head right this second, but I suppose I'll grab Jimmy's while I'm here. Then, after one of them pays, they'll quickly walk away with their heads huddled together, acting like they just got away with something. I always want to tell them that they don't have to treat it like something shady or sordid, and that no one gives a crap, but I'm happy they're using protection, and I worry that even mentioning it would embarrass them so much that they wouldn't come in next time. Every time this question comes up, I wonder, what makes you think I think anything about you? I think about my feet hurting, my back aching, and how long until my shift ends. You? Not so much. I'm a cashier and this is it. The only time I think about the customers is when they're doing something actually annoying. So if you're not licking your fingers before touching the bills, being super critical about how I do things, telling me the same dumb joke I've already heard 5 times this shift, or anything generally annoying, I don't care what you buy. Or sneezing into your wad of cash, or pulling it from a sweaty crack of your body, or giving me all the soda-soaked change from your cup holders. The only time I can remember having a thought about a customer was when they brought our camouflage print lingerie with pink edging. I honestly couldn't care less if they wanted to buy it, even though I thought it was hideous, but while folding it, I couldn't get over how itchy that fabric was. I was curious about why someone would subject themselves to that. My shopping habits were judged by a cashier when I was 14. My music teacher sent me to the store for unlubricated jimmies. They're a way of keeping actors' sweat from damaging body microphones. It was a small town and the cashier knew me. She was horrified about what I was buying, and before I could explain, she insisted on calling my mother to let her know I was doing the deed. I then got to explain in a very loud voice that I was a virgin and they were for microphones. Even if I had been buying them for other stuff, I would think the smarter move on her part would be to sell them to me. If teenagers decided to do the deed, then they're going to do it regardless of how adults feel. Public shaming and denying them protection is not going to stop the deed, but can lead to other consequences. This is the correct attitude to the sheer inevitability of teens doing the deed, regardless of what the adults in their lives think about it. If they're gonna do it anyway, just make sure they're being safe. I used to work at a local pharmacy and a regular customer came in. The only items he purchased were a wrist brace and a tube of KY jelly. He must have noticed me looking at the items and he said, "I swear these are unrelated. Whatever helps you sleep at night, dude." When parents get angry at their kids for wanting a 50-pack of stickers or some cheap child's magazine, saying, "We don't have enough money for that," while paying for cigarettes and lottery tickets. Sometimes I just lie to my kids about not having money because we have so much of this random crap at home that I think I'm going to scream every time I open a drawer in the kitchen. As a parent of 6-year-old twins, I could not agree with you more. It's like every gosh darn step I take, I'm stepping on a coloring book or a random pack of some kind of bullcrap that I just said, "Fine, you can get it if you just shut the heck up about it." I used to work at Save-A-Lot as a cashier. Our client base tended to be a little lower on the economic ladder. At the first of the month, when the benefits get loaded to their cards, I always hated to see people push up a cart full of soda, chips, etc. These people also usually tended to be in poor health. I didn't really judge them, I more felt sad for them. I also didn't like seeing people who would come in with the PIN number for their card on a piece of paper. It was a small town, I know that wasn't your card. I didn't hold it against the people who had the misappropriated card, but more against the people who sold their $300 worth of food stamps for $150 so they could buy alcohol, cigs, substances, etc. The sad part was, a lot of the people selling had kids. I learned the other day that you can apparently get judged for buying alcohol at 7 a.m. The cashier was pretty vocal about it, and if I wasn't so non-confrontational, I would have told a manager. She flat out said something along the lines of, "It's a little too early for boozing up, don't you think?" 1. None of your business if I'm drinking early in the morning. 2. It was on sale during my routine trip to get milk and such. Am I supposed to just leave it and come back after 5 p.m. to buy my alcohol? However, when I got home, I realized how my entire purchase looked. I got milk, chocolate milk, Lunchables, also on sale, and a strawberry daiquiri. She probably thought I had kids or something, so I understand her concern. Kind of. She didn't have to say anything though, it really struck a nerve. That is so dumb. Just because you're buying alcohol at 7 in the morning doesn't mean you're going to go home and drink it immediately. Do you buy a week's worth of groceries and go home to eat it all right away? No! When contractors or painters would buy America's Finest or Speedwall paint, I assume they're overcharging a family or company by getting the cheapest paint possible. I'm not a painter, I'm a roofer, but hear me out. If I was to do every roof with top-of-the-line materials at every stage, I would be bankrupting families left and right. The construction game has changed a lot even in the short decade I've been playing, and the market is flooded with all sorts of products that may or may not be worth it. Navigating that minefield is supposed to be my job. I try to take homeowners by the hand, break the news to them that they can't afford Mike homes, and present their tiered options. But sometimes they're convinced they know more than you. They're a retired contractor who has never seen the new products, or they watch a lot of DIY Network, or they helped somebody build a deck. They're convinced that you're trying to sell them on bullcrap to pad your bottom line, and they will insist on the cheapest option, then cut things out of it. Underlayment? Don't need it. New flashing? Too expensive. Rotten eaves? We've got some wood lying around. Fiberglass shingles? What are you, a commie? Not because they can't afford better, but because they think you're trying to cheat them. And so I wind up at the lumberyard because I can't force them to do it my way, putting in bullcrap orders because that's all they're going to pay for. We sell Batman underwear that comes with an underwear cape at my work. I always have a little bit of judgment when those come through my line. Also, when old people buy leggings. Oh my god, my parents bought me these undies for Christmas. I'm 26. Actually, they are the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles version. But what do you do with the cape? You can't wear these under anything because the cape bunches. Am I supposed to wear these over my pants? I feel bad removing the cape portion, so I've left it on so far. Not a cashier, but I shop at Whole Foods. Invariably, there will be someone in front of me. She will have some $30 snake oil supplement and an overloaded container of prepared food, the kind where you pay by the pound. She will pull out cash as she's rung up and realize that she doesn't have enough to cover both, so she takes out the snake oil and leaves the food, which cannot be resold. I assume not only is she a moron for buying that crappy supplement, but is hoping the cashier will let her keep the food once it's been voided, since it's going into the trash. As a former Whole Foods employee, these people are infuriating. Wife was buying stuff for camping: hatchet, rope, some duct tape for the hole in the tent, small shovel and matches. The cashier was looking at her and she bursts out, "Husband teed me off for the last time." The cashier's eyes bugged out and he just let her go. Wife and daughter come out and are laughing and crying. On Mother's Day, a young guy, probably too young to have kids of his own, checked out with a Mother's Day card and a box of Jimmies. I said, "You must really love your mom." And he said, "Oh God, I didn't even realize." I work at a golf course and a medium bucket costs $7 for 40 balls, while a jumbo is $13 for 100 balls. When people come in and get two mediums for $14, it instantly makes me think they're idiots. In case you're dumb too, two mediums is $1 more for 20 less balls. Ha! I work in a small hardware store, and if someone comes in to buy a plunger, and sometimes it's these young women, I wonder if they're the ones who just took a big enough crap to clog up their toilet and have to come in to get a plunger. I've had to buy a few pregnancy tests in my time, and I always switch the diamond ring my boyfriend bought me to my left hand so I don't get a look of pity. Just so you think I'm not crazy, I have a really irregular period. Sometimes it'll skip a month, sometimes I'll get 2 in 1 month, but the point is I'm on no schedule, so I have to take pregnancy tests a lot because I'm not sure if it's my weird period or pregnancy. I work at a gaming store. Anytime someone buys plastic sleeves with artwork for their cards, I judge them hardcore. They're a great seller, but I hate them. In college, I worked at a pharmacy at the camera counter. I didn't do most of the cashiering, but did occasionally. Here is a combination of items purchased by one customer that caused me to raise an eyebrow: chocolate syrup, Astroglide, children's toy handcuffs. I don't really care what you're buying, but if you buy a huge box of Jimmies and a big bottle of lube and change your mind at the last second that you don't want it, F you. Now I have to walk around the store doing returns with those things in my hands. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.